Live, joined tonight with Thomas, Paranoid America. How are you, brother?
That's me, man. I'm excited to finally do this with you, man. We've been planning this for a while.
We have, right? So much good occult, esoteric knowledge and topics to dive down tonight. Um, is it running on your channel and also a first, right? Connecting to your live audience as well.
I think so. We'll find out after we're over. Yeah, but so this is my premiere first video on the Paranoid American YouTube channel. So if you're not following me already, please do that and join my small little army that we're gonna amass into a giant horde over time, hopefully.
Exactly. And it appears we are live. I'm opening it up right now and I'm
Sweet,
about to
man.
share in the live chat. So everybody make sure you also go over to Paranoid America, give a like and a subscribe to Thomas.
Thank you, guys.
And
Yeah,
come on, there we go. Boom, you are live. Look at that,
we're killing it,
Christy.
man. It's a new era.
Oh, and Roosevelt Suarez, you already got several people, 4 likes, 4 watching. Right, we're
I love
good.
you guys. This is great, man. What a great way to start a Friday.
Right? Oh, it is Friday and going into Friday, so it's weekend
By the
of
time we're
burning.
done, it'll be Friday. So happy Friday.
Exactly. The long weekend. Here we go. In the live, there is Thomas's channel. Make sure you go and check it out and give a like and subscribe. Boom, right there, right there, right there. Already following. Look at that. Boom.
I love you guys, man. We'll make it worth your while. Trust me.
Right, you always do. And so we before we went live, we were trying to load up some artwork and uh, turn a little bit of art that I have from my clothing line back in the day. I think you said this one, and send it over. And now you're going to put it into some AI at some point
Yeah, we'll,
through.
we'll mess around with that. I've got it loaded up. But before we get into all the high tech computer nerd stuff, I don't want to lose everybody. So we'll bury that one in a little bit. But yeah, I'll show you from step one how to take just like any sketch that you've got and turn it into, like a 3D realistic photo, or make it look like a really nice painting, and all sorts of cool options. And man, if hopefully I can get everyone as excited about it as I get excited about.
Right, I'm stoked. Like it's game changer, really, to be able to bring the artwork to life. Essentially, like eventually Bert and Ernie down there, I'll have a whole cartoon series and like a little show with my homunculi and bringing them to life essentially in the metaverse in the long run.
We're all going to be NFTs soon.
Right? It's like, and I suspect we almost already are. But let's not go too far down that rabbit hole before we
Yeah, where
get
are we
in.
starting with this, man?
So alchemy, and this right here is some of the witchcraft alchemy stuff, and I find it just fascinating that they're bringing and making applicable use of the sacred geometry as well as the chemistry that I'm finding with my experiments, and then turning it into this spiritual spell casting, and kind of just wanted to get some of your thoughts on that.
I mean, so I think sacred geometry is what was one of the first things that really got me into this woo woo area, right? And it's because I really do believe this, and it's something that you just kind of realize over time. But these are just patterns that, ancients have been seeing. And it's a pattern that doesn't just happen visually, it happens vibrationally, it happens through sound, it happens through, like, I even saw you had like cooking or something was in this little sheet here. These are just sort of archetypes that everything falls into at some point in time, and for you to be able to recognize it and put it into these very oversimplistic, diagrams. We're basically looking at platonic solids right now, and just like any platonic solid, what you see is not necessarily what you get. So there's a perfect version of a triangle, right? That the triangle at the top. Well, that triangle, in that amount of perfection, doesn't really exist in the material world as we can perceive it, but it does exist as a template and an archetype and things that try to, um, you know, basically fit into that mold. Like things follow that as the plan. And I think that if you extrapolate that just one level higher, you get these weird cymatic patterns and these like complicated geometrics, sacred sort of emblems. But all these are just showing you here's the ideal template that you might want to strive to fit inside. But I also feel it's really important to never get caught up in, and I have to like match this exactly. It definitely helps to get very close to it, like you were describing before. I don't want to share too much, but you've got an experiment, and if it's off by just like a fraction of a frequency, right, it does make all the difference in the world sometimes. So sometimes in those cases, it's important, but being able to recognize the patterns, some people think that it's woo-woo sacred geometry, but it really is just you're observing some kind of universal language. And here's those platonic solids, right? So here's perfection in an abstract form.
And see, what I've found is connecting these platonic solids, and that what the ancients knew is that these are the shapes of crystallization and matter and of a solid form, and thus also energy and dimensional energy. And when combining it with Walter Russell's octave vortex-based periodic table and other octave arch periodic tables, it takes the understanding of just creation, the universe, and what is solid matter and energy to just breathtaking levels of possibility, really.
Well, and we're so spoiled too, because you had that picture of, like, for example, the dodecahedron. You look at it now and you're like, yeah, I think maybe I remember seeing that in geometry class, and maybe I slept through some, lecture on that particular shape. And it's got those cool little 5-star flower-looking petals. That dodecahedron was such a coveted secret that people died over revealing that. I believe that the Pythagoreans, that was one of the secrets that they were supposed to take to their grave. And there's a funny stories, but I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the students of Pythagoras was rumored. One example is that he was trying to explain the square root of 2 as this like, irrational number, the square root of 1. And so there's some stories that Pythagoras drowned him because he was like, no, there's no such thing as irrational numbers, you go away now. But the other versions of that story is that, and it seems more credible, is that he actually revealed the secrets of the dodecahedron to somebody outside of the Pythagoreans, and that's what got him killed. And I don't know if it's true. It might also be one of those like William Morgan affair situations where it's a story that gets planted to reinforce the seriousness of these oaths that you take. But also, maybe it is true, right? Maybe some dude actually got drowned because he told someone about the dodecahedron, whereas like now kids are sleeping through it in class.
Exactly. But it's the full teaching, right? I bet it was
it's not
more
just the shape. Yeah.
Yeah, just the shape. And that it could even be so advanced, these sacred, like universal or metaphysical knowledges in their completion, that it could even lead to this lost Atlantean technology or universal portal technology. Who knows? But Bob Greenier at the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, I'm not sure if you are aware of his work, but
I'm not.
He's the one of the top physicists and academics in actual cold fusion and EVO, exotic vacuum object research, development, plasma fusion, and all of that.
Okay.
And he's recently a huge inspiration to me and whatnot. And that he has been decoding the pyramids and some of the basalt within it and the different anomalies and proving this super advanced technology that has been used and the evidence of it. And it's these brand new streams he's been doing. His latest one was earlier today. And that it's putting forward more of this theory of this lost Atlantean higher civilization technology that was these pyramid builders around the earth before the mad cataclysm of the Younger Dryas event, whatever it was, and that there is actual catastrophism and like these downfalls of man, golden ages, and now science seems to be actually proving this as well, where before this sort of speak was referred to as occult or esoteric. What are your thoughts on this, Tom?
I think we're of like mind here, man. Like we could just pass the ball back and forth, but in my mind, modern day alchemy is probably the closest thing that we've got to, you know, like a veiled description of fusion, whether it's cold fusion or another example. I don't think I've brought this up before on another chat, but when I was at Disney, we would get contracted by other companies that just wanted like that Disney touch to do some kind of animations and stuff. And one of those companies was called Superwave Fusion, and they had a version of cold fusion that they were working on. And I went into it thinking like, oh, this is woo-woo. This is just like some kind of pseudo scientific. The amount of money and research and actual, you know, scientists and lab coats and actual laboratories that were working on this and were 100% convinced it was all real. And then we had to make the animation that would explain it in a very easy to understand and digest form. And through doing that, I was like, man, I just realized how little I know and how much I thought, you know, I knew versus all of this. And over the last
You're
10
gonna
years,
have to
man,
send me links to that after the
I will.
show.
I looked it up
That's
recently and it didn't look
huge.
like either they went underground or something else happened or they ran out of funding, but it was a huge operation out of Israel, I think. Um,
Really? No, they
and
often are out of
And one of the
Israel.
things that I've learned too over the last 10 years specifically is so much of the technology that we've got now that we think is so far ahead of time and only could have happened in the last, you know, in our lifetimes. It's very just like smaller versions of crude technology that's been around since forever. And most of that technology is rediscovered technology. It's not like someone sat down and invented, you know, binary system for the first time ever. They just happened to know
Right?
how to make it very small and make it run a little bit faster and more efficiently than before. But all of these ciphers and encodings and patterns have existed since forever. So I think that this modern day version of what we're talking about, occultism and esotericism, it's really just like a new rediscovery of these old formulas that, you know, people, we lost because we laughed. You know what I mean? We lost them because we didn't respect them. And now we're starting to realize that maybe they were onto something. Maybe those thousands of years of people focusing on the same topics over and over, maybe there was something to that.
That is absolutely amazingly put, brother. Like, ah, bravo in those words, because that is the truth. And like, it's so advanced, yet we've laughed at it and mocked at it for 100 years now, while we've been stuck in this one paradigm going just digital meta, losing ourselves in the physicality and away from the spiritual soul in the West. And we've had it all before. And that in all of my claims, I never claim to, oh, I've discovered this new cold fusion thing. It's like, no, I've rediscovered Sir Isaac Newton's cold fusion. I've rediscovered this alchemy cold fusion and this advanced, ancient, lost technology and understanding. And like, I will never try to take credit for creating it myself, as with the numbers and the different geometric numerical patterns, systems, geometries, and what has to be another dimensional unified force scale of geometry, or what they're trying to search for now, calling it the theory of everything or whatnot.
And a
And
lot of the names you just dropped, they didn't take credit either. They all claim that they were just rediscovering something from the ancients as well. And I imagine, I don't know, but even the first person to discover the Fibonacci sequence or the golden spiral or any
right,
of these universal principles, I find it hard to believe that they're like, oh, I did that, I made that. I created the
yeah,
golden ratio.
Fibonacci did not want it to be called the Fibonacci spiral, right? Oh, that's funny. He's like, yes, it's the golden
So
spiral.
so I got a controversial take on this that I don't know if I agree with this, but it's a controversial statement at least, where getting, so tied to the material world over, thousands of years, maybe it separates you from the spiritual in some way, in like a woo-woo way, right? But what about getting entwined with technology? Like, is that not kind of helping us back away from the material realm? But is it stepping like away from the material realm in the right direction, or are we like going even farther away from the soul in the process?
Right? Yeah, that's a very good point, and like uh preponderance of it. And I agree, like philosophically used for the right purpose and in the right way, it could help and like essentially will bring us back to this one what up one on one podcast, the chosen one. Good to see, brother. But the Tower of Babel moment where technology, speech, and like essentially the universal God code and humanity all combine at that one point again. And I do believe that AI and all of that will be a key part of it. And that is it, will we actually achieve this harmonious next level ascension, or are we going to once again destroy ourselves and use it against each other and implode like we have before?
Well, that depends if you're subscribed to the Patreon or not, because on the Patreon we describe how to. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that there will. Like, I always wonder, the Tower of Babel, right? Did it take out everyone, or was it one of those like Titanic Twin Tower situations where the dudes that knew didn't show up to the tower that day, right? They were like, "Honey, I feel like not going into the Tower of Babel today. I'm not feeling great." And then it fell that day, and then they get to keep that knowledge and pass it on because they realized that someone was going to screw up and knock that tower down. And I feel like that could be a very real pattern that keeps repeating itself, where someone knows about a catastrophic failure that's about to happen, and they get to be the keepers of that knowledge. Just de
Yeah,
facto, if it wipes out everyone else that knew about something, now you get to be sort of the one-eyed man is king on the whatever, the land of the blind, right?
yeah, the planet of the blind, exactly. No, that's a very good point too, and what seems to have been the case and the reset that happened around the turn of the last century during World War One and Two, and that before that, a lot of the Masonic writings I've read, as well as the academic writings, everything was catastrophism. It was that there was a reset. It was that Atlantis existed and there was this higher technology beforehand and this higher society. And then all of a sudden, we've been tricked into this YOLO, you only live once, we're the greatest of all time, we've never been this good before, new era society and belief.
It's that feeling that every young kid growing up thinks like, I wouldn't want to live in any other time period, or at least not every kid, but it's kind of like this majority feeling of, I couldn't imagine life without today's modern conveniences. That's probably been a fairly reoccurring theme, relatively, unless you were just born just in time to be cognizant of like the Black Plague, in time to succumb to it. But outside of those, everyone probably feels like they're living at the height of technology, and they wouldn't be able to imagine any other way of living.
Yeah. Because, God, it would suck to be in one of the down cycles, right? Like,
Would you know though? Because if you didn't have more than a generation of context, it never really
yeah.
would seem like a down cycle unless you had some kind of, like omnipotent or omniscient style perspective. Which how could you?
What do you think of this Sumerian tablet? Does that look pretty Star Trek-esque, or what is going on here?
Have you ever tried teaching yourself to read Sumerian
I have not,
in
but
cuneiform?
my friend Charlie C just got Chat GPT-4, and we're going to be giving him some different tablets and texts, both from the ones like in the Mid East, like this one that are authenticated, as well as a lot of the golden tablets from the Illinois cave, the Burroughs cave. I want to get some of the Crespi collection ones as well, and see if AI can read them or translate them, and thus kind of help verify their authenticity.
Can we
And
trust it though? Like, cause
of course not on the first ones, but like it's an experiment, right?
right?
And then
No, of course.
uh,
It's
yeah,
so
it's like
great at sounding convincing and feeling like it's right. It like chat, not just chat GPT, but any of these AI
it,
text algorithms, they're
hundred
great
percent,
at commanding authority. So and it's funny because we're in this situation where even today there's so many different types of cuneiform that we don't know how to decipher, because the cuneiform technique is one thing, but depending on which region, like you might drive,
right?
14 miles to the east, and now, yeah, like sure they're using cuneiform, but they've got a completely different decoder ring, and the same exact symbols and the same arrangements might not mean the exact same things as they did from a town over. So that's what makes cuneiform like so hard to interpret in some cases.
And I fully agree with it, and that's why I believe and suspect that as we develop the AI and the translations of these different American tablets as well, portraying these different pictographic cuneiformic languages, pre-Sumerian, pre-Sanskrit in a lot of cases, like in the Crespi collections and stuff, that as we get different attempts at translations and then build the language model of what we get on the North American, South American side of these tablets compared to the Middle Eastern time. And I believe they will eventually verify themselves as you've obviously Scott Walter's work, probably seen a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably much more of an expert on a lot of this than I am.
Yeah, but he does on America Unearthed and stuff. But he goes on Leak Project with Rex a lot and stuff. But of verifying through the geology and then connecting with linguistics back in like Norway and Sweden and stuff of the runic languages on the tablets that they've gotten, I believe, in Michigan and stuff like that, and that they're popping up all over. And I know when the one year that I spent as a brother in a Masonic lodge, that I would often bring these topics up to the fellow brothers, and everybody is always fascinated in it. And that it's the belief that and understanding now that Moses and was it Imhotep or the pharaoh that changed to a monopolar dynasty or religion in Egypt and then like left Egypt. It was the same as Moses or something, and he took the technology out of the pyramid and out of the Egypt dynasty, being the, why can I not think of the word?
What and I wanted to point out too that like according to some sources, it was the same person, but I would posit that we're talking about the same archetype, right? We're talking about
Yeah,
that same cymatic pattern. It might not have been the exact same, skin cells type of person, but it might have been the same person and that same concept of, someone fit back into that pattern and rediscovered a way of living.
fair. Um, what do you make of the
We got to
seals?
get into the Mason thing a little bit, man, because I don't want to
Yes, we
leave that
do.
one on the side. So you mentioned that you were a Mason for a year, and then you started telling me that part of that was that you just made it to entered apprentice, essentially. So you didn't get into fellow craft and master Mason. So first of all, like most people are always asking me this, right? But I want to know, like, what made you want to join the Masons? And because like it's not like they come to your door and knock on the door. That's actually
No, you
been
have to seek it
prohibited.
out yourself, and
Right. So
it
what were
was
you doing? Were you just like on the way home from like a movie and you're like, hey, there's a lodge, maybe I should join? Or was it something that you had contemplated for a while and then ended up trying?
no, my buddy, one of my good friends' dad's a Scottish guy, was Scottish Freemason, and so I'm like, yeah, he's a decent enough guy, and definitely not evil. He's got a good job, it's cool.
Did that
Uh,
surprise you? Did you go in thinking first that it was like only evil and then you met someone that wasn't? Or did you always feel like it might have been in a gray area?
oh, definitely like gray area. Like obviously, you can't believe everything you see on the internet, and
And how old are you at this point?
it was about 10 years ago now, so mid 20s, late 20s.
Okay, that was about the same age for me.
And so the thing is, though, it was also at a point in my life where I was very, very messed up on prescription opiates. And at the height of the prescription abuse that they were giving me, that I've now been off of for 4 years, thank God, saved my life on that one getting off. But so I didn't take it as serious as I should have. Then also, just never followed through with becoming getting the further degrees and whatnot. But while I was there, quite fascinated with a lot of the people, with just like the interactions, and that I knew a lot more for my own research, and then like access to the library and the amount of reading I did compared to other members and stuff like that. And
That's
yeah.
one of the big things that a lot of people don't realize, because a thing that I hear a lot is like, oh, you could just go and watch a documentary, or you can just go and read all of the catechisms and the rituals online. Yeah, you can. And most of the time, they're verbatim, they're true. It's not like you're looking at something that's been outdated for a long time. The Masons kind of pride themselves on retaining these old rituals. So it doesn't change very often. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that once you become a Mason, you get access to Masonic libraries, and every single lodge has kind of like a little rare book, sort of
Oh,
collection
there's
that you got
so
access
many
to.
gems. So
But
many.
there's people that will travel, they'll go on pilgrimages to certain lodges because they know they've got some specific book that's never been digitized. It'll likely not be digitized, or if it is, it'll be in some kind of private collection under a name that you won't even know to look up. So there's all sorts of like access to secret hidden knowledge by going through the degrees.
Um, yeah, I like they wanted me just for my own alchemy experiments to join the research lodge.
Hell yeah, man.
Um, I was down, but then I just fell off. I found it a little bit Zionist too, for a place that claims to not be religiously influenced. But
Yeah, so with the modern times, right? Now you can go, and it's almost like AA. As long as you admit that there's a higher power, they don't
yeah, yeah.
necessarily care what that higher power is. So but it's probably going to be like an Abramatic sort of higher power. It's going to be like one of the big three, right? You can show up with anything you want, But there's definitely an extreme minority of people that might go up with, you know, like an Anton LaVey Bible or something like out of left field, I think.
Right. And yeah, and like, no, it's very inclusive. Like my own personal experiences there were all positive.
So are you
And
still technically entered apprentice now, or did you fall out
I,
of standing and then
yeah,
like
no, fell out of standing through being in arrears for not paying my
right,
membership
right.
and not closing it properly. So I think I'm technically blackballed, but not entirely
I
sure.
mean,
I'm sure I
nah,
could,
dude.
if I
Honestly, they're
wanted
hurting
to.
so bad for
Right.
membership and money at this point. If you were to be like, guys, you know, I can't afford, you know, whatever the last 10 plus years of you know, back dues, but like I'm still down. I'm sure they would you know, be like, come on in. But at that point too, you might not really need any more information. You might have surpassed what most of those local lodges get you. So at this
Right.
point, it would just be like a really a really painful library card to get. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And yeah, like my one, so the year that I was there, my worshipful master, he was the year that he became an honorary 33rd degree member and got like went over to Europe
Yep.
to
Yep.
like get
That's
the
when they have to like
ceremony and stuff.
kill a kid or something, right?
Right? Who knows? But before he went, I had told him about the conspiracy of the P2 lodges
Yeah, the
running
propaganda do.
everything.
Yeah.
Running everything. He's like, no, that doesn't exist. And that he came back and he like came to me and he was shook and he was like, Bernie, you're right. There's something to that. And I was like, okay.
Well, they were supposed to have been officially disbanded in like 1986 or something, but what it represents though, and I think this is where Masonry gets most of the deserved flack, is that just like these cymatics and these archetypes and these Platonic ideals that we've been talking about, Freemasonry represents this structure that can be very easily applied to get power and authority over almost any sort of culture. So, for example, when the Bavarian Illuminati decided they wanted to get more power, they just infiltrated the Freemasons because they realized, hey, if we just get the worshipful master of a lodge, then technically we got that whole lodge under our wing, and they don't even have to know about it. And that sort of thing can
yeah,
still happen. So that P2 lodge, right? All you got to do is get some of the kind of like head masons at that particular lodge, and if the people at that lodge, like the lodge here in Orlando, right? It's pretty much like the tax collector, and there's like commissioners in there, and there's comptrollers, and you know there are big players in these lodges. So if you were able to basically corrupt one at that very high level, yeah, you can do some absolute damage. And I can only imagine that if the propaganda do had the amount of international influence that they were purported to have had, because it was like a financial scheme they were running, I think. So I mean, when you've got money and you've got power and you've got corruption, I mean, that's a nice little concoction to do some real damage.
right. And that gets into it as well. Like that the Masons, from my entire like experience there didn't seem to be any like a bad soul, but that I did get the inkling of infiltration and members that were members of many other secret societies that they then branch out from and that influence them. One being the Rosicrucian
Mhm.
organization, and how much I guess influence and sort of uh, yeah, influence they have over the Masons, and I guess the Masons kind of revere them, sort of thing. And that I was told tarot is a very real thing because the Rosicrucians practice it and have showed them or something. And
Yeah,
that
I've always
was
understood it as the
like,
Rosicrucians are almost like the librarians of those dusty old libraries, and like they're the ones that actually know what book that thing that you're talking about is in. The Freemasons are much more generic because the Freemasons, you
yeah,
can join it for business networking, for social networking. Although there is one unifying, at least modern day Freemasonry, there's one modern theme, is that if you really like chess, right? you're not going to just go to like a random business or like a random public place and then just hope there's another person that really likes chess that's like down to play chess at that moment, right? It's such a rare and niche thing for you to expect. So Freemasonry, it's kind of like joining a chess club, but instead of everyone loving chess, everyone
It's
loves like old arcane books and, you know, esoteric teachings. And it's hard to find an in-group person, you know, like a real life meet space sort of club that is interested in those kind of things that exist outside of, say, like a Dungeon and Dragons collective.
yeah, it's like halfway between that and like a giant business social club. Absolutely.
And honestly, at this point too, a lot of people see masonry as an extra sort of like life insurance slash retirement policy, because if you've been in it long enough, they've got Masonic retirement homes, and
And
Masons do
and they
truly.
do us so much good, like through the actual social programs and like fundraisers and stuff like that. Like they actually do a lot of that. That's something I experienced through the lodge, is that they do actually put a lot of money and care
Well,
back
good and
into like
bad.
people
Good and bad,
learning.
because here's where the conspiracy theorist in me comes out, and that's that the Scottish Rite also is an example of where a lot of that early schizophrenia research, electroshock therapy, you know, pumping kids full of amphetamine and drugs, and the discovery of SSRIs, all this also comes directly from the Scottish Rite funding in the 1930s. But it's because they decided that they were going to take all this money and power and start focusing on something that they thought was going to be this like next quantum leap for humankind, and that was going to be understanding the brain. And their version of how do we understand the brain was going to be how do we understand what schizophrenia and dementia is. And that's where they started. And man, that amount of research basically turned into MK Ultra, basically turned into everything that we have now as like a travesty on the human mind. It kind of came from that well-intentioned funding. So there's a plus and a minus to all that. And I also want to note that a lot of those charitable acts of Freemasonry today, right? So you're talking about like the Scottish Rite helps children. They've got like a children's hospital. The Shriners have another version. There's even like a Masonic medical research center. They discovered something called the M cell, which is named after the Masonic cell that exists in the heart. But all of these things, in my mind, controversial. They're a little bit of a PR campaign, because if you go back not even that far, 50, 60 years, there really wasn't any sort of public outreach, you know, philanthropic organization of the Masons. They really were kind of like for themselves. It was like a little trade union that would guarantee that you could get a job if you wanted to move cities or states. You know, it was before LinkedIn, or before you had some kind of like a standardized system that was like, yeah, this person's not just a crazy person that hopped off the back of a train and, you know, they're just gonna like murder you in your sleep. So being a
So
Freemason would be like, just check with me with the guys over at Lodge in Illinois, and they actually would check on you, and they'd be like, oh yeah, you know, he's in good standing. Unlike BurnEye, who's been in arrears for over a
10
decade, you know,
years
go hire
now.
that
Oh
guy.
no. And so I gotta say, from my experience, it's like I never made it past that first degree. I kind of always like I do eventually, I think, plan on like going back and getting to the third degree. Although it's like I do have some, I don't know, but it might. I just don't know. But
It's mixed,
the
man. It's a
the
mixed
I
bag.
never made it to the third degree to make it behind that locked door where I saw peeping through a couple times some very
You
shiny
know what's behind there
crystals.
is a freaking pizza party, dude.
Oh, I've been.
And you didn't
Well,
get it. You didn't get the pizza
I
party.
didn't get the pizza party. No, just the
What's
dinner
what state was
afterwards.
this, by the way?
I'm in Canada.
So okay, so this was a Canadian lodge.
This is a
So
Canadian
I don't
lodge.
know. This is outside of my understanding, because I just know about the northern and southern jurisdictions of Freemasonry. But I don't know like what happens when you cross the line to Canada. Do they like, you know, do you have to wear like a different like magical underpants or something, or
I have no idea. There was no magical underpants involved for me, so couldn't tell you. The So the first degree, the one degree I did go through, I read the practice online the night before, and it was
The
turned out
catechism you're talking about?
yeah, like just the first initiation and the practice of it, and like it was exactly word for word what happened, and I had like read all the way up to like the 20th degree the night before, and was like, well, that kind of took the fun out of all of it for me. Now that the first happened exactly like it did, now I've read the 2/3 of the way through. Interesting.
Yeah,
And
and we were
then
talking about this earlier, and I mentioned that this is one of the reasons why it's supposed to be the big taboo of divulging the secrets of the lodge. And it's not necessarily because in that first degree they're like, here's the cheat code to life, you know, and if anyone else finds out about this, we'll kill you. It's more like, hey, don't ruin this for someone else that comes in and didn't read ahead. And an analogy that I was mentioning is like if you go into like a movie that hinges on, you know, like some big twist ending, if you just stand up as the credits are starting to roll as the movie starts and you're like, there's the killer, you know what I mean? Or like at the end this happens, like that's kind of a dick move, and you might get beat up
right,
for it. So it's
spoiler
sort of a
alert.
similar, yeah, dude, it's much more of a spoiler alert, at least in modern times. Now if we rewind the clock 100 years, yeah, dude, maybe you got drowned and they threw you out to sea because they legit were taking those oaths seriously. But I think today it's evolved into more of like a metaphorical, like, hey man, don't be a dick. Like that's kind
Yeah,
of the
right.
oath.
And just the practicing of like in respect of old traditions and yeah, symbology.
And if you really care, like you said, Bernie, like just go and Google it, and there's a 99% chance what you read is pretty much what's going to happen in a lodge.
KY. Don't burn me, KY.
Yeah.
And we are live on Twitch. I have angered my fellow Twitch podcaster, apparently. Oh, here we go. Some real witchcraft. Back to the symbols and sigils. What do you make of this? And, you know, like that's another thing people don't understand is that what we're looking at here is not what I ever saw in no Masonic lodge. This is occult stuff well outside Masonry and the average.
You would probably find someone in a Masonic lodge that knows what this is and would geek out, you know, talking about it and discussing it, because this is sort of the trade, right? But yeah, you wouldn't see these symbols in a lodge because this has nothing to do with that particular symbolism. It doesn't mean that the same teachings and the same underlying principles that maybe they're teaching in witchcraft and essentially sympathetic magic on a lot of levels, that sympathetic magic happens in almost every culture that we've got, though. Even if you go to the most fundamental, you know, sort of religious church and you're praying, you're doing sympathetic magic, even if it might be heresy to call it that. It's literally, you know, sending your will out into space and hoping that it comes back down in, you know, tenfold or whatever. So it's very much the same premise, just, you know, we wrap it in different ways.
We're going to be joined pretty soon by my friend Jeremiah, a great engineer and also into understanding the occult. I put this schematic up his last time he saw it. He got really excited, so I'm just baiting him now.
Where's this from?
I randomly found it on Pinterest. Pinterest actually has amazing schematics if you just type in anti-gravity and free energy. Like there's mind-blowing shit that's just like so complex, so detailed, and so many of them. It's just like some of them, right? Oh, see, there he is. Well, you better hop on then there, JP. If you want
Yeah,
to
get on
see
here
it,
before we accidentally blow our fingers off, man. We need an
right?
adult in the room.
Oh God, he is definitely not the. Oh, there. Oh, look at that! Just like that, there is Jeremiah. Oh God, he is
Successfully baited.
Oh, look at that! Oh, you gotta turn off YouTube now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just I forgot to pause. So sorry for the echo for your audience. I have paused it, fixed the solution, and yes, let's take a thorough look over this diagram, because to me, what this looks like is a very vintage electrostatic machine with a rather unique set of capabilities. Now, I will ask, how many of you in the audience have heard of Martin Fleshman Memorial Project and seen the most recent posts? Oh, I know
Yeah,
you did,
his
Bernie.
live stream earlier today.
Audience, please feel free to comment if you've seen it. We would love to know how much of this audience is that audience.
Okay, and for reference, Thomas, that was what I brought up earlier. Bob Grenier going over the granite and basalt in the pyramids of Giza there, and proving that there was like nuclear technology and stuff like that being used.
Did you see the most recent O-Day explaining Frank Polifka's wind hex, which basically means tornado witch?
Yeah, I caught the last half. Tornado witch, so like the summoning of vortexes, essentially.
Quite a fantastic mechanism. So, in the Tornado Witch, his very simple device using something shaped precisely at the angle of the side walls, and the divergence of those angles are now being able to produce complete disintegration of glass, silicate bottles, of various other materials, chicken hearts, wings,
tungsten,
biological materials, grains, stones, all order of materials that you could possibly imagine sticking into this machine. They are torn apart, not mechanically, but electrodynamically. Charge separation is incredibly powerful. And as we've said many times on your channel, Bernie, when you strip the electrons right out of all covalent bonds, they cannot covalently bond because they rely on the valence shell electrons in order to connect with each other. And when you strip those out, the nuclei is now accessible. And when those nuclei slam into each other, it's not too surprising to see protons and neutrons break off. And we get transmutation of elements and the excess energy required that was absorbed by the atom originally during its binding.
Now you said chicken hearts. Are we talking about using anything we want as fuel?
I'm using that as an extreme example, yeah, because you could stick literally anything in there. This guy is tossing soda bottles, glass bottles, cans, grain, hay, biological materials, anything into this machine. And it will tear it apart into a dried, moisture-free powder falling out the bottom, and not within minutes, not like a grinder. This is nothing like a grinder. It literally takes it apart in the course of less than 15 seconds, completely disintegrating the covalent bonds and causing it to drop out as a powder, which is highly accessible and very useful for industrial applications.
Okay, I missed that aspect of it. I saw a little bit of the powder stuff. So he showed that the vortex literally is tearing that into anything into that like monatomic powder, essentially.
It's not monoatomic.
Not
no,
monoatomic.
What it does is it strips the electrons out.
Nanoparticle, sorry, material.
So a funny thing happens on the way to the protons. Well, you strip the electrons off; they're considered a barrier. You can consider the electron valence shell sort of like a shield,
like an ionosphere or something.
In a manner of speaking, just like the Earth's ionosphere blocks high energy, positively charged solar particles, primarily being made of hydrogen, helium, and other materials. This would act in the same way, where the atom itself would have an electron valence shell blocking other extremely large amplitude electromagnetic perturbations from accessing the nuclei and causing a sufficient acceleration for those things to bombard each other. But if you get the electrons out of the way, well, the nuclei can actually slam into each other, and when they do, they tend to drop off pieces of themselves. If you strip one single proton out of a nuclei, its associated neutron, also equivalent to binding it, will also fall out. And it turns out that neither protons nor neutrons happen to be very stable when they're separated from the atom itself. This allows them to become other elements, transmutation, fundamentally. How do we turn something heavier than gold into gold? Well, we've got to strip off some protons and neutrons. Once we've done that, we have access to the first stage. And after that, we can now strip off more protons and neutrons and choose any lighter element that we want. But that's not where it ends. We can also combine protons and neutrons as long as we have the correct electric fields and the binding geometry, and produce heavier elements, which is not common, but also quite possible. It just takes a more complicated geometric field.
And we're talking about adding, removing, sort of these electric elements. But I really firmly believe in this concept of like the seven seals, not in a biblical sense, but in the sense of that all of this can be described in at least 7 different contexts. So like before we were talking about Freemasonry, and their version of transmutation is essentially like taking like a normal human and making them better, like a normal man making good men better, I think is the way that they kind of phrase that. But that's that one sort of personal level version of this alchemical process. There's the actual version that we're describing too, where you can create gold and other sort of metals through this transmutation. And I think that there's also like a very chemical version, like for example, the process of creating like DMT out of ayahuasca. It involves sort of these same kind of steps where you're constantly adding something and then removing something and then adding
Oh
something
man,
and
I would love
removing
to
something.
comment on exactly that regarding ayahuasca and dementia.
Please do.
But
Sorry, I'm just on
unfortunately,
the phone with
I
my wife
can't
for a
for legal
second.
reasons. I will tell you this. It's far simpler than one might think.
Oh yeah, I mean, you go to the pool store and you basically raise the pH, lower the pH, raise the pH, lower the pH, and then after you do that enough times, bam, you've got the alchemical gold, essentially, the magnum opus.
Right, you've got it. So we played around with monoatomics and quite a bit involving electrogravity and unbalanced kinetic momentum. Generally, we're still stuck on a very old physics format that all forces must be equivalent. The vacuum or the scalar potentials and the electromagnetic potentials, which are measured in the form of, in terms of the refractive index, permittivity and permeability. Permittivity is your electric polarization. Permeability is your magnetic polarization. And we can stress that magnetic polarization to form even more complicated interactions. So unfortunately, it's not quite so, I guess, straightforward, but we can take apart matter. And matter is what? A quantity of how many protons and neutrons we have in any given individual nuclei. Of course,
Right.
they will
and what
then collect
arrangement
free
they're in, right?
electrons from the atmosphere or from any other source that they can gain in order to form what we would call an atom, which has a balanced number of electrons and protons and neutrons, so that we have a proper quantity which is self-stable. Nevertheless, if we have a differential, if we don't have enough electrons, the protons and neutrons are not self-stable. Just take a look at the physics that we have right now from particle accelerator data. If we have a neutron that's sitting out there in free space, it's not bound inside of a nuclei, and it's not being stabilized by some external field, it tends to actually break down.
All right, hold on. The particle accelerators often remind me shockingly like the geometry of these alchemical sigils, seals, and spells. And the amount of energy that they have going through them. Is that in fact what they're doing? Are they opening up these crazy portals? Like, well, what's going on there? Well, what do you think?
Well, a portal is an entirely different context that we can get into in the future. In the simplest format, though, let's just talk about transmutation. What's required to create the right conditions for nuclear transmutation. How do we take a heavier element and break it down into a series
Put
of
it on
lighter
the anode
elements?
side of
Oh, simple.
electrolysis.
What's a hydrogen, right? What is hydrogen? You would know this, Bernie. Go ahead.
Of what is hydrogen? Atomic hydrogen, the basic hydrogen, what you're breaking down from water, the fuel of everything.
Nice. So what's hydrogen? Why is hydrogen or helium or any of these very light elements different than, say, some more complicated molecules?
This is hydrogen right here. This is the atomic orbitals of hydrogen, and I find this particularly fascinating in the dimensional geometries of how the planes that they're showing up on for apparent bond or the orbital layer. Can you explain this a little bit, what, Jeremiah?
Yes, I can. So as the electrons are orbiting around the nuclei, there's a very hard limit at the fine structure constant, which is based upon the Planck scale, where the electrons can't actually fall towards and strike the protons in the nuclei. We would think that the negative electric charge of the electron in a hydrogen, our simplest single proton atom, would be capable of falling into the proton and would strike it, but for some unknown reason in the conventional physics, that electron does not fall into its oppositely charged, positively polarized proton in the nuclei. And so why does this happen? Well, it turns out that there's actually a polarization of the refractive index, which means there must be something between the electron and the proton which would prevent those two things from directly interacting with each other and simply falling towards each other. As the electron falls towards the proton, it begins to accelerate and gains a tremendous amount of angular momentum. At some point, the emission or the radiation of the electron pushing off its relativistically amplified geometric field of negative potential in the scalar refractive index, that is the permeativity of the vacuum space, is now radiating off more energy than will be required for it to not radiate off or hold in order to come in contact with the proton. And so it reaches a stability point at which it now is based on not only the proton and electron relationship, but also the vacuum refractive index. There's no reason for this to exist if we think that the vacuum is empty. But if the vacuum isn't empty, if it turns out to actually be filled with physical and realizable matter, such as positronium, as in a proton and neutron chasing each other, and we have trillions of these things in any given unit volume, those physically have to be repolarized, and their continuous radiation to the external environment of electromagnetic waves, which we would call gravity, aka mass, is exactly why the electron does not strike the proton and why it reaches an equilibrium point.
On a slightly macro level for this, Juan and I covered on Occult Book Club. There was a book called The Voyage to Cartesian, or The Cartesian Voyage, rather. And it described, man, it was written in the late 1600s, but they were describing this concept, which even to me, 300 years later was like blowing my mind, where they describe how the absence of an actual vacuum, like there can't be a vacuum, and what Descartes was trying to describe was that everything in between, like me and you, or like if my two hands here, even though we know that there's like air, right, and there's oxygen particles and nitrogen particles and things, there's also outside of all of those, any other little space that you might think is space is taken up by what he just called orbs or balls, so that no matter what you're doing when you're moving around, like we're in a constant state of not solid matter, but like liquid, right? Like the air is a liquid, but not in this vacuous version that we kind of like see with our eyes and kind of feel. Like as I move my hand around, things are just constantly moving out of the way so that there's never a gap anywhere. Like there's always just everything is filled with something at all times, and there's really no such thing as a gap or a lack of something. It's such a weird concept, but he just described it as balls. You know what I mean? There's just balls everywhere.
Man, very well said. And I would specify that although we end up getting a spherical distribution in the far field, which is the distance away from where the field interaction zones actually cohere with each other and create a net energy momentum, or in terms of our modern physics, we call it the energy momentum tensor. This is how much physical motion is encoded into any physical volume of space. But the physical motion isn't some abstract concept that has to do with the vacuum or just the refractive index. Oh, hold on just a second. Babe, you've gotten a link. Please join.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, going on. So yes, we found out that it's not just simply this abstract concept of a completely empty vacuum, but it turns out that the only way we can account for the stress energy that's contained within any given volume of space at the Planck scale, which defines the fine structure constant, must be made of matter. And the fine example I can use to demonstrate this factually is even within particle accelerators, which bring particles to extraordinarily high damn near luminal velocities, or almost approaching velocity c of acceleration, that there's an arbitrary distance for a photon to travel from a photonic emitter like a laser source before it strikes some absent area of vacuum, which should be empty. And when it strikes that quote-unquote empty vacuum, for some reason at an arbitrary distance, the photon disappears. But what happens? Well, we end up getting a positron and an electron emission coming straight out of that region. And what angles do the positron and the electron have to each other? They're directly 180 degrees. They pop apart and physically separate directly opposite to each other with the velocity and equivalent energy of 1022 kiloelectron volts. This is how we know that they must have already existed in that space, meaning they weren't produced. They didn't suddenly come into existence out of nothing, but they were there. And this is how we can guarantee for sure that these particles permeate the entirety of the vacuum. There's no real logical explanation beyond accepting that they must have already been there. For some reason, physics doesn't like this idea. I guess it doesn't like an aether space completely filled with physical matter, which actually exists having its own mass, energy, and kinetic momentum and angular velocity. But we have to accept this because the data is compelling and it demands that we justify why an arbitrary value is observed.
The universe is filled with everything, right? And nothing is empty.
Well, not just everything, but it's filled specifically with something called positronium, which is a positron and an electron chasing each other, reaching the minimum distance, and no longer capable of actually falling into each other. They reach a stable point, they become invisible to the outside reference, and now we just simply consider them as part of the refractive index. So I can say this another way. Space is heavy. It has weight. The vacuum itself, absent of all physical measurable matter, has a physical weight that we can define. We call this the cosmological constant.
Is positronium one of the ones that Walter Russell states is at the very top of his vortex-based periodic table? I think it's right next to hydrogen.
I would love to answer that question, but I'm not sure if Walter realized the existence of this material. The only reason why I even know about this is because of a communication that had extended almost a year long with an individual who happened to work for the Skunk Works.
Where's this research taking place for the most part right now? Is it spread throughout the world? Is it, concentrated in a certain country?
It's concentrated amongst the internal operations of the world's major powers. It's not widespread across all nations, but most nations, including Russia, China, the United States, and quite a variety of others, have discovered this. And ironically, it was Tesla himself who had released the information and explained precisely how to perform these actions and get the outcome. But he didn't talk about these specific individual particles because Tesla had a problem with electrons and with these subatomic particles. He realized that these things were just field effects. And so I'm using the positron, the electron, the proton, and the neutron, the antiproton, and the antineutron our six constituent parts of stable matter within this refractive index as reference points. And Tesla didn't really like these ideas as particles because he could see how wave functions and the electric scalar potentials along with the added motion would explain the same exact phenomena completely and no longer require the elicitation of a physical, structured, finite particle. So there's no saying that the particle idea is correct or the wave function idea is correct. I couldn't tell you one way or the other. I can tell you, though, that the result of the experiments is exactly the same regardless of which model you choose.
All right. So what do we make of this matter?
What we make of this is we now have identified the mechanism by which the Hutchinson effect can take place at fairly low energy levels because the conditions must be met. And the conditions are as follows. We need a magnetic B flux, as in we need some saturation in the J-curl tensor or the permeability of the localized vacuum. This changes the amount that the vacuum can actually hold the magnetic flux before it breaks down into its constituent parts that are responsible for forming it. We can also recognize that electromagnetic or electrodynamic systems involving coils or scalar potentials can produce the phenomena at will of our own choice and design. We can now manipulate matter and choose what type of matter we want to come out of that system. Bob Grenier has pretty much demonstrated this, I would say, conclusively. I've done it in my vacuum chamber on a multitude of occasions. We've even seen this strange phenomena without vacuum in normal atmospheric conditions using a catalyzed dielectric material as a liquid in Omasa, which is a Japanese company which uses vibration plates powered by piezoelectric transducers and a mechanical vibration to physically separate out water and produce other heavier elements and break down platinum into a various number of constituent particles and elements, including some that are heavier and some that are lighter. So there's a sufficient amount of evidence to demonstrate that we can do this. Right now, personally, I'm working on a system to optimize it, and I'm by no means the only one. I can at least reference 5 different people who are doing this, but I'll definitely mention Gerald, who has been working with this, Bob Grenier and his associates, which would be Hank Jarin, Corky, and a number of others, which have successfully witnessed this. Even Adam, or as he would call himself, Space K0, has witnessed these same phenomena. And it really isn't that complicated. We just have to accept the fact that the universe isn't structured in such a rigid format as we've been told.
That's so dope. I'm loving it.
As you're talking here, I'm just running some of BurnEye's sketches through a combination of stable diffusion and control net. I was telling you earlier before, BurnEye, that I don't have them all set up on this one. I just kind of have some minimum, but I've got this thing called a canny preprocessor inside control net. But you see all these options here. You can generate a depth map from anything that you want to feed into it and generate new artwork based on that depth map. They've got normal maps. The other big one is Scribble. I don't think I have Scribble set up on here, but I do have Canny. So you can see is the here's your original sketch here, right?
Yeah,
this is the one that you're showing.
Amazing. That's so
here's
cool.
the Canny version of it. And if I click preview,
are you saying
results,
that
there we go.
you literally put this into a algorithm to produce the color?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's more than just the color, yeah, but
yeah,
so like
adding
So this
more
is the
detailed,
canny
more
ones. So for example, if I were to run it through a depth map, it probably won't look great because it's just a black and white photo. But I can show you what the depth map of that would look like. Yes, it's just like a 2-dimensional plane. And then I've got, if I ran through Scribble, here's what the Scribble might look like. Oh, you know, I don't have the
I've never
model.
actually seen
I
this
don't have the
happen
model
live.
set up.
This is pretty cool.
right?
So
It's
here on the
amazing.
canny model, it gives you this little traced outline. It almost looks like a 1980s style like vector program on like an old Apple 2GS or
does.
something, right?
It's
It
so
does.
cool.
But now when I put the prompt in, instead of the prompt just trying to generate whatever randomly, it's gonna try and fill it in and kind of, for a simpler way of phrasing it, color inside the lines. So now when the AI generates, it's gonna try and adhere to these kind of outlines. So that as I write, you know, I'm trying to get something really realistic. So I'm typing like movie scene of a pyramid, cinematic, epic, realistic. And it's getting kind of there. It takes a lot of massaging into place, right? But you can see that it adheres exactly to the line work. Like
It
it's
really
not
does seem
deviating
to
a
have
little
gotten the
bit.
perspectives right. It's got the
Right?
foreground
It's
and the
so
background right. It seems
awesome.
to have identified the horizon for which objects can exist upon, except for that last pyramid in the back.
But
That
it's
seems to be a
kind of
little out
because
of place,
I
but
thought
I got to
it
give it
should
credit.
begin with
It's
as
done
a
a good
sky
job.
pyramid.
Well, and it's because
Yeah,
like it's
there's
tried
a
its
cloud
best
up
and it
there.
sees these like, is
Yeah.
that a tree?
No,
Is it a cloud? You've
yeah,
got like a
no,
little
it's no,
filigree on the left, right? So it's doing its best to like make sense of
for
what that
sure.
might look like.
Oops.
I would love if you could take,
Mhm.
GPT-4 or GPT-5 and have a little marker where you could stick it on one of those object inlines within the trace structure and tell it which piece is what. So you could have picked that thing floating in the sky beyond the horizon and up and above and said, "This is a cloud. Don't screw it up. It's not sand. It's not a pyramid." And then it would know to turn that into a cloud.
You
Unfortunately, I
absolutely
don't know if
can.
it's that developed yet.
Oh, that it is developed. I forgot what it's called. It's called regional regional blocking or block regions. And essentially you can go in here and draw like a little mask and say like, this part is a pyramid and this is a cloud and this is the water. So as it goes through and it tries to make sense of the original image, you're giving it that extra little context. And some of them make it really simple so that you can basically draw like anything blue is sky and anything I put yellow is sand, and it'll correlate those colors with different regions of the image and do masking and everything automatically.
May
And
I
you can
ask
see
you?
here's the Z depth version. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've not used GPT-4 or GPT-5. For some reason, I think I have some hack on my computer or maybe something else going on that I can't use the services. It automatically kicks it, says that I have exhausted the maximum number of my free options to render an image. And this happened the first time I ever used it. I have never been able to successfully render an image even with GPT-3. And we have 2 new versions out now that I have yet to use because my computer absolutely prevents me from doing it, which is why I'm very, very curious, since you seem to have the access to it. I would
Well,
love
I don't
if
think you
could
can
do a few
use
search terms.
GPT to generate images. Like GPT
Yeah,
can read
GPT's
images.
a chat bot. It's not.
Yeah, it's a text model. It's called a LLM, I think, which is like a large language model. So the way that ChatGPT and LLMs work is that you give it some kind of context and it just starts generating one word at a time, and like each word it tries to make based on the previous ones. But all of these image based, a lot of them either use a GAN, which is a generative adversarial network, or they use something called diffusion methods. So this stable diffusion, and which kind of works the same way as Midjourney and DALL-E. It's essentially just like a really hyped up version of a denoise filter. Like if you were to open something up in Photoshop and it's got a bunch of noise in it, Photoshop can be smart enough sometimes to like try and add clarity to it. It'll take like a blurry out of focused image and make it a little bit more in focus. Well, if you just take that same concept and imagine you just took pure blur and kept sharpening it over and over and over until it became something, that's essentially what all the stable diffusion is. You're saying every time you deblur this image, make it look closer to, in this case, you know, a realistic pyramid. But if you typed in dog, it's taking that same just static noise and blurriness and trying to like shape it into something.
I like it. It's
Well,
like
what I
each
would really
one
like to know
is
is, could you put in
whole new
text
world.
prompts and have it generate images dynamically without a visual prompt
Yeah,
previously
that's
imposed?
what you do with like Dolly and some of the other programs.
Yeah, so like for example, if I just disable this control net, it's going to stop trying to follow that layout. So now if I just run this again without anything to follow, now we actually have a truly, Salvador Dali style painting of a pyramid. And if I wanted to go in
That's
here
pretty
and
cool.
like I'll bump this up to make 8 at a time. So now we can see a whole bunch of different variations of what a Salvador Dali pyramid might look like with no guidance at all. And you
Wow,
can
hold
see
on. Go back here. Okay. You see that center pyramid?
yeah, let me pull that one up
The
specifically.
8
This
I'm
one.
images
loving
pyramid.
this.
Yeah, that one right there. Is there? I would recommend that you capture that. I would love to find out what the actual angle from the peak to the base is, and let's
Ooh, I
see,
see what
because
you're
there is
saying.
this 73 point what is
Good
it 345. Geez, I hope I have that number right. There's an exact angle that has been well recognized for the Godi pyramids, which is a Russian pyramid adaptation, and I would be very, very interested to see if it's chosen the same angle based on the information.
Right?
So yeah, I'll grab this one and send it to you guys, and we can analyze it, and then I'll show you something else
Yes,
cool
let's
too.
do that. If this
This
means
is-
that the GPT program, or if it can analyze that and find the correct angles, we might be able to extract fundamental geometric structures.
Dude, not only can it find the angle, but there's now a model that came out this week. It's been worked on for the last 6 months. There's a model this week. You can upload an image, and it'll show you exactly what angle, if it were a real image in real life, like where the camera would have been taken, and then you can have it re-render that image from any angle you want, 360 degrees on XYZ planes. It doesn't always look great because there's you don't have all the information you would need to say, look at this from top down, but it's kind of the same premise as those rear view cameras when you start backing up in your car, where it can kind of triangulate the position, and once it knows the angle and sort of the lens refraction, it can make an amalgamation of what that would look like from some other perspective. It's absolutely wild, man. But I was going to show you this
I would
too.
love to pump in the following search terms: positronium-based anti-gravitational diagram of successful apparatus.
You're gonna have to help me. Was it positronium based
Anti-gravitational diagram? Even if you just use those 4 search terms: positronium-based anti-gravitational diagram, and then I recommended of successful realization or of successful. You don't necessarily have to finish the sentence. It doesn't really care about proper grammar so far as
not only does it not care about proper grammar, but the way that this diffusion works usually is that you're trying to describe something visual. So these abstract non-visual terms, it's going to be a crapshoot. So let's see what happens, man. And on that note, the reason
I love
why
that you're
this
doing
is
this
visual
live. This is so awesome. I've never actually gotten to see this work.
Well, and if you look at these sampling methods too, the ones that are typically, if you were to go and use a free online service, like something really fast, they're typically using these Euler algorithms, and there's Euler and then Euler A. Whenever you see an A, that stands for ancestral. So ancestral meaning that it continues to evolve each time that you resample something. So it constantly is changing and typically grows in complexity and detail. Whereas a non-ancestral, it's always working towards one common goal, and you're just iteratively refining it over and over. So then we're getting a little bit of the weeds, but the reason why I'm pointing out Euler and Euler
following subtext terms.
Yeah, go for it.
Angular dimensions, or geez, how would we say that? How would you tell it to specify and measure the angles of the apex and the walls?
Use the angle you want.
Yeah, you would tell it. So if you want a 45-degree angle, I would put that. So let's.
Well, we
I
don't
want to do this.
We don't want to tell
first.
it what angle to choose. We want it to choose the
You
angle
wanna
based on all the
randomly
information
get
and
it
tell
to
us
sample.
what it
Are you
finds.
looking for specific geometric measurements?
Right, because let's say we have no idea what the angle is. Let's just pretend we have no clue at all, and we
That's
don't
what
have
it's
any
given
numbers
us.
at all. What
There's
can
the
it find?
images it gave us. There you go.
Yeah, and it's not like there's just this one source of truth, right? This is just one model of many, many, many models. This one I'm using right now is called Realistic Vision 1.3, and technically this is the in-painting version. Let me take the in-painting out, which is a whole nother rabbit hole of like what in-painting is. But Realistic Vision has been trained on actual photos. There's models that are just based on geometry. There's models that are only based on Disney films. So we could pass this exact same prompt out and it'll come out looking like Don Bluth drew it, which is kind of like the fun aspect of all this. So here's a non-in-painting version. Let's see if
If
that
you
has
will,
a
I'm
marked
trying
difference.
to sort of dehumanize specificity for
I
individual
like those
creators
images,
and bring
though.
this
Those look
into the
badass.
totality of all that has yet to be produced or all that has been currently pumped out. I would love to find the angles.
Are these what it came up with Jeremiah's
Yeah, this
description?
is positronium-based anti-gravitational
Oh, that's
diagram of successful realization, angular dimensions.
I would love every one of those diagrams. Please,
Yeah,
please,
100%.
Oh, yeah,
please
dude.
take
Like,
every
look
one of
at
those.
that.
Let's
Well,
copy
you know
paste
what's-
all over his
Jeremiah,
images.
you just got
You know
gold. Let's take a look at these.
So this is just this one seed, and we generated 8 of them. Like I can go in here and just be like, here, crank out 800 of these guys, and we would be here for a little while. But
Maybe 9 more. Let's get 9 more.
we'll do 8 at a we can do 8 at a time. And then the other thing too is you can do negative prompts. So like for example, some of these, like we might not want some of this kind of like attempted text, right?
Geez,
And
Bernie, are you seeing Walter Russell?
Yeah, always.
Because I'm seeing that too here.
I'm adding some negative prompts here for text, blurry, watermark, cropped, just to get those out. And then I was mentioning these sampling methods. These ones down here actually take into account the noise that happens through just photons bouncing around. See, like Euler and Euler A assumes this perfect vacuum, but like we were just discussing, real vacuums don't exist, right? So as the light bounces off an object and your eye is observing all of this, there's a little bit of noise, there's a little bit of chaos that happens that makes those things look more realistic. So that's what a lot of these more advanced sampling methods do, is they simulate the actual sort of chaos that gets introduced into the system of light bouncing around and how we perceive it. So if I use one of these, they usually take a little bit longer because it's actually simulating light, almost like a 3D engine doing ray tracing, but on a machine learning level. So now if I regenerate these, it's probably going to have a marked slight difference where instead of getting these kind of blurry looking 70s classroom presentations, it'll probably be a little bit sharper.
So you said it's simulating light. Can you define parameters for like the angular distribution?
If you wanted to train your own model and add your own sampling method, yeah, these ones are based on actual observations of people that have been running models through how photography represents these kind of formulas. They kind of reverse engineer like a realistic photograph and then extract the formula from that. So you can see these ones already have a lot more contrast. They're a little bit more defined because it was a little bit more specific and because of that sampling method.
Mm.
And then we can see that a lot of these have kind of got like spherical shapes or oval shapes. So if you really wanted it to be angular, for example, I can give weighting in here. So if I wanted to say angular, I want to give that a 1.5 weighting. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to see the results are going to have lots of angles on them, just because I'm being a lot more specific about, give this 150% more. And bam, you can already see there's a triangle here.
Yeah.
We've even got like a little, you've got like a eye of Providence down here on the bottom left.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty epic.
Yeah.
Pretty Illuminati confirmed by the AI.
This is like not even the tip of the iceberg, man. This is just like the most basic versions of all this. You've got LoRa networks and hyper networks and textual embeddings and stuff. And again, we were just starting out with like this cool little canny drawing that you drew,
right.
this pyramid drawing.
Very
so
impressive.
let's take that prompt, right? Positronium based anti-gravitational.
Apply it to that
and
drawing.
force it into this. And this is where the fun starts, right?
Wow.
So let's see. And we'll get 8 different versions of it on top of that.
Beautiful.
So wait, what's the string now? Positronium, anti-gravity, angular.
It's
Distribution?
positronium-based
Oh.
anti-gravitational diagram of a successful realization with angular dimensions.
Oh,
And then I've
boy.
got some negatives here. So, and then here's what we're getting on the other end of that. They're almost done cooking. So, and it's
Interesting.
I love it because, man, it keeps like the exact dimensions. And if you don't want it to adhere
that's
exactly
amazing.
to those lines, right? I can
You
go.
can always permutate any of those iterations and
Yeah, I
keep
mean, it's
taking it farther.
basically endless ones, and I can take this and inpaint it. I'll show you in a second, but I can also say, hey, like right now it's this guidance start and end, right? So as it starts with this blurry noise filled image, it's saying like don't pay attention at all to BurnEye's drawing until you start getting to like the final steps of your modeling. So that this is almost like if you're cooking a steak, right? At the very end, when you're like adding like the final little ingredients, that's when it's like, okay, now we're going to mold this into BurnEye's drawing. So if I take the guidance end and I knock it down to like 0.4, now what's going to happen is that it's going to kind of use this as a basis, but it's also going to deviate a little bit and let the noise kind of take
Right.
over.
It's
This
fun
is
playing
the
around with the
Alchemy.
deviations. You can really get something quite different.
That's the alchemy of
And this is
graphic
totally
AI.
awesome. I'm really glad to have had a chance to take a look at how this works.
So I'm sorry, I jumped in a little late here. Which program are you using?
This is just Stable Diffusion, which is basically an open source version of what Midjourney, for example,
I was
runs
going to
on.
say it looks very Midjourney, but nicely packaged for your desktop.
Yeah, and this particular one, it's called Automatic 1111, and it's basically a wrapper. There's a program called Gradio, which is like a Python front end, and they wrap all of the functionality of not just Stable Diffusion, but you can see I've got all these other So let me show you this one. This is a brand new one that came out maybe like 2 weeks ago. Model Scope Text to Video. So I'm going to take this exact same prompt. It's probably going to look absolutely crazy, but I'm going to put it into a text to video, and we're going to run this
video.
It's going to generate
It's going to generate video.
Please.
It's going to generate a
please.
video, but it's going to be on another computer in another room. So unfortunately, I can't show you this one when it's done generate. Wait, maybe
Just
if I click this, it'll show it.
Can you just generate like a really short video?
Yeah, I'm running this remote on a computer that's in the other room. So I think
Yeah.
after I generate it, it's just like sitting on the desktop
We'll
in the other room.
matrix it back somehow, some way.
Yeah, well, I'll send it
this
to you
is
after.
super cool. Like, there's no doubt about how cool this is. This is
What I
stuff that
like
I've been
about
wanting
it
to
is,
actually see in action forever, and the fact that you're showing us live, this is the first time I've ever had a chance to see how this works as it's generating. And good God, is it fast! It's
the interface is
quick.
the interface
Seems
I
like, look at this
really
one.
like, because it's still very familiar with Midjourney. You're just not having to deal with like testing it out on your phone, you know, in Discord.
Here, there's the video.
Oh,
so
wow, there we go.
So since it's not really mentioning a lot of visual elements, you're almost always going to get some weird pattern like this.
This is not as weird as you might think. Okay, let's take a look. Hold on, before we switch out of this, let's take a look at what we're seeing here. Okay, so we're seeing nested fields, which, as far as I can tell, are moving from the center outwards. They are propagating outwards at an arbitrary velocity, which obviously is, like I said, it's entirely arbitrary because no parameters are given for any given x distance versus time.
This is real
and this is a rendering basis, but it shows the fundamental. We have a central point, a focal point at which the effect is taking place.
Right.
And then we have a propagation outwards taking place in nested fields. Now we have two different fluxes. We have our B field, which is concentric and circular, and we also have our E field, which is linear in the form of these rays or these lines propagating from our central point. This is in fact not so different from the Frank Hill and the Seversky diagrams, and we can even see these in a variety of other very old books and
with
diagrams from, geez, I'm trying to remember the names.
With a lot more layers, this kind of looks like that schematic that I wrote down a few weeks ago.
Exactly. It's shocking how well it's doing.
very, yeah, very much more detailed. The closer to the actuality of what's going on.
This
I
is
only put down a
awesome.
few layers. Yeah.
Let's see. I don't know if this one generated or not. Let's see. But I was going to show another well, so this just ran again, and it just made something that
All right,
looked
so
very
we've
similar
commented
to the
on this one.
previous.
We can go on.
Yeah, like that's next level results right there. That's so cool.
And I want to show you another kind of like on a less serious note, but on the same cool technology. Like I could go in here, and for something a little bit more visual, I could say,
Hold up just
Nikola
a second.
Tesla
Yeah, okay, let's
punching
do this one.
Edison.
Then I have a really simple prompt, and I'm curious to see if it'll get the simple prompt correct, because we do have a reference that we can bring back into this stream.
For image or for video?
For image, just image. We only need an image.
Yeah. What do you got for the prompts?
Okay, so there's something in the Frank's book that it's called an equal potential field. I would say example diagram of equal potential field. Equal potential is one word in the original text.
Usually when you see example and diagram, you're going to get some kind of text or like graph looking paper. That's usually
Well, that's
how
what we're looking
these
for.
engines interpret. Yeah. I think it's still waiting on my video of Nikola Tesla punching Edison. Let me just see if here it is. Let's see what it looks like.
Oh my god!
Isn't
No
this
way!
nuts, dude? And the reason that you see this Shutterstock logo there is because
those
this
are the
model was
images it
trained
referenced.
on
I love
Shutterstock.
it.
Exactly.
No, this is great. This is absolutely
it's so smart. Look, it even has the film grain. Like you can see like the little imperfections of the film that it was not filmed on because it's not real. It didn't exist before I clicked this button just a few seconds ago.
Now, I'm sorry for those who are saying this isn't humanly accurate enough, because this is fucking awesome.
Well, if you compare what Midjourney looked like 1 year ago from today, and now look at the new version 5 that they just came out with, that exact same progression is going to happen with that silly non-human looking video. In a year from now, you're going to be watching Netflix and not realize that it's being generated like 5 seconds before you're watching it. That's a little bit hyperbolic, but I really do think that's kind of where it's headed.
Right? Like
if you get prompts about specific scientist names, will it try to cater within those scientist names?
If it knows about them, and if it doesn't, you can train them who those scientists look like. I might have actually destroyed something. I'm getting a weird error now. I might have sent it too many commands at once. Let me try it one more time.
Or
it doesn't like what I'm doing to it.
Universe right now.
Yeah. I've just ripped a hole somewhere in time space, and it's catching up.
Yeah, in space time, it's happening live.
But I do have a backup, believe it or not. So let me run it on my backup. This one runs a little bit slower, but here's the example diagram of an equal potential field, and we'll run it at 768 here. And you can see it exactly as described. It starts with kind of blurs.
Book. I mean, that first image, that looks sort of like, papyrus paper. It's almost identical to what the original
the diffusion
first page of the book looks like. So I'll point that out. It got that part right.
So there's the first one that it came out with. This is what it's looking. You can see that it tried to even spell out the word equal potential. It didn't quite get it, but it tried to.
I'm going to pull this up so that you can see it. Just give me a minute. I've got to go through this, and it's going to take a little bit because my computer is kind of maxed out here. I have a better computer, but I'm using my older computer because I don't need the hacking BS that happens 100% of the time when I introduce a new digital device to the internet and talk about these topics. It usually happens within 24 hours and it gets hacked to hell.
Yeah, I definitely hosed one of these, so the fun came to an end on one of them. This is
amazing, brother. This is fun.
This is awesome. I mean, this is what we should be doing, because we're going to discover the secrets of the universe if we can only understand how all of these individuated parts come together.
And welcome, Ben Bobson. Odin's Alchemy, good to have you on again, my friend.
Hail, hail. Yeah, I come in right when you're talking computery stuff, which I'm the worst at. Go ahead, Paranoid. What were you going to say?
Thomas, do you know Ben and Odin's Alchemy? Or
yeah, absolutely, man. We've done a couple shows together. It's good to see you again, man. The beard is looking glorious as ever.
Thank you. Yours is also. Yours is also. I was supposed to be on one-on-one podcast, actually, on a whole thing with it, and I one of the few times in my whole life I've had a dream, and I dreamt that we had the podcast. And I don't even know if Thomas was supposed to be on it that day or not, but Thomas was on it in my dream. And it was a most excellent podcast. Yeah.
It might have actually happened, right? We just don't get to experience it in the meat realm.
Right. And I was like, it was such a good show, and I was all happy about it. And then Juan never posted it, and for like a week and a half, and finally I'm like,
you're getting mad at him and then find out it didn't happen in this world.
Yeah, and I'm like, dude, like, what's up with that show? And he's like, we never recorded it. Now. He's like, you never showed up. I'm like, what the fuck?
Let's see, what do we got here? McGraw-Hill Book Company Incorporated. And let's try to find this. Charles Proteus Steinmetz. This is where this information is coming from. And I'm going to scroll down, find the image, and then I will share screen. Electric field in circuit, and I need to find the equipotential field. So we have the electric field distribution. We have the magnetic field distribution. So we have our electric scalar potential, we have our magnetic curl vector, and now we need to combine these two in their localized refractive index modification. I must find this diagram. So I'm scrolling through it now. I'm not even looking at what's on the screen, so I apologize if I can't see. I
love that name I just saw. It said the science of God. So I'm going to generate a bunch of those that say science of God and see what that comes up with.
That's a good prompt.
It really is. Absolutely. And this is the creation of all matter and the universe as we know it. These are where the field forces and the phase conjugate construction of matter are growing from. They are compound and, what's the word for effects that come from the phase conjugation of a multitude of different parameters? I'm forgetting the name.
Did you just generate these?
Yeah.
Yeah, just now as we're talking.
This is live. He's just going to be asking the
prompt afterwards.
Is that text? Is that text like
spellings? Do you see some of the spellings it's coming up with?
It's almost readable. It's really close. Like this one says.
Oh man, wouldn't that be wild? Yeah.
Way too cool.
And you can like what I was showing before with this control net.
Because in Northern European, God is good.
Can you improve the resolution on the text? Is it possible to be legible?
One of the best ways to do is if you know you want it to say something, you can put the text in and have it build around it. And also I can set my sampling step. Like if I crank this all the way up to like 150 steps, sometimes this will get you really defined words, but it won't ever make them spell it out correctly. It'll never know how to spell the word science correctly. It'll just get the edges of the letters. It's almost like ChatGPT can become really convincing, but not be right. It'll still be wrong. So AI artwork kind of follows that same principle where it'll look really, really correct. It'll get the edges and everything just perfect, but it doesn't really understand what it's trying to draw. It just knows the rules of drawing. So here, this is about as many steps as you can give most of these images, unless you start doing all kinds of like customization to it. And you can see it took a little bit longer to generate these 8, but now these ones are going to be about as highly detailed as this particular Euler-A method is capable of doing. So let's see what the difference. Oh. And you can see it's got like this like highly polished look, but even still, so now the word science is much clearer, right? It almost looks like a Helvetica style font, but it doesn't know what it's spelling yet. It just knows that those are real letters.
But the images,
some of the symbology that comes up can look very runic or astrological. I find that interesting.
Yeah, the different sacred.
Oh, look at that word
geometry.
science. That one looks pretty damn good, man.
We got real science mixed with AI right now, right here. Boom. It happened through alchemy.
This is like the monolith exploding here. Let's add that. Let's add monolith exploding.
Oh shit.
And I do a lot of tricks here too. Like,
I
for
was just thinking
example,
of that movie.
Cinema 4D is like a 3D software. So sometimes I'll throw in like 3D type terms. So I'll throw in like 12K ray tracing, global illumination. Now when I run it through, we should get something that looks a little bit more three-dimensional.
Could
a
you
little more
also put down like a visualization style for certain types of information? Like the style of infographics, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, if I just put the word infographic
Why
in
is
here,
always
I can
this
force
kind
that.
of culting now in that? Like that's fascinating.
You can see the monolith is coming out strong. Oh, you know what? I've still got it at 150 steps. I'm going to drop this back down to like 20. It'll go a lot faster. And it'll look completely different. Like these ones are going to look like someone spent a few hours putting together a scene in Blender or some 3D program and rendering it. But look at these, man. So there's the monolith exploding.
Absolutely.
It's like
epic.
there's this molecule or nucleus just exploding on top of it too.
Right? Like exactly. Like an occult or eclipse happening almost of a sun.
I've got another prompt, if you don't mind.
Sure, I'm going to run this infographic style, and then what's yours?
Yeah, like the science of God. Could you add infographic to it to see?
Yep. Here it is right here.
Yeah.
You can see it coming together, and it's already got this very infographic feel to it. Oops.
Look at that.
Wow.
Something you'd find in like, Wired magazine or something, right?
Yeah.
I see why Elon was terrified about this.
Yeah, this one's in a sandbox playing. It's not out there.
Wrong.
And I want to show you one really quick example of something too. So like, let's take this one just at random, right? I'm going to send this to what you call in painting. And here in painting, I'm going to take this green orb and I'm just going to paint around it. I'm just going to very crude because, this tool doesn't have everything built in. And now up here, I'm just going to say Earth, planet Earth. And then I'm going to tell it to only draw this masked version of it. So now, and I'm going to change this to a square. So now when I run this, watch, it's going to just draw that little sampled version, but in the context of the image that it knows. And then bam, I just turned that little green ball into the planet Earth by just saying Earth. So now if I want to go over here, send this back to the in paint, undo this, and let's say that I want to change this thing into what do we change this into? I'll make it like an office building or something, right?
Pyramid instead of monolith.
It's going to be a weird shaped pyramid, but let's see what it does.
Get really
that
esoteric.
Was our original point.
Realistic pyramid. Let's see what happens. And now, okay, so this one actually try to change some rest of the image too. So now we've got like two pyramids, but like there's my Earth. And here's multiple pyramids that we just drew in there. And this is so cool because you can make AI generate something and it might get really close. And then you can go in there and tell it like, no, change this one particular detail to some other detail. So yeah, you hit me with the next one, man.
I'm still surfing.
A vortex in there. A vortex and a periodic table or gold?
Ooh, I am curious. Does it understand the term exotic vacuum object?
Pyramid above it. That's super interesting. You put realistic and it put another pyramid above it.
Well, the realistic is more about the style that it wanted to draw it in. Because instead of the realistic, I said it could have shed like 1960s Disney cartoon or Dali or Impressionist. So here's a golden vortex.
Wow.
Nice.
It's like ribbons almost.
And like this is, I'm gonna give away some of the secrets here too. But let's say we found this one. I really like the way this one looks, or maybe even this one right here. So I can find the seed of this one, and I'm going to plug that seed in and take this exact same prompt that we just made and put it into something called Deforum. And Deforum will basically it'll make a video out of it by generating this image first, but then it's going to try to extrapolate sort of the position of the camera in this fake, sort of image, and then start moving the camera through it and then regenerating every single one of those. So it's a lot easier when you actually see it happen. So I'm going to set this to the same settings as we had for the image, but then in keyframes, I'm going to tell it to move through 3D space, and I'm going to have it translate by about 4 pixels on Z. So this is going to be flying into the image at a constant rate. And then we're going to do it for 120 frames. Yeah, it sounds about right. So now if I hit generate here, we'll see it's hopefully start rapidly generating the frames one by one. And then at the end of it, it'll spit out like a little video of it. So it says 4 minutes. It should probably not take quite that long. It'll take like maybe 3 minutes. So if you got any other prompts, man, hit me. I can start loading them up here and get them.
Here we go. I finally found it. And the problem was entirely on my end. It was a spelling issue. So let me go ahead and select.
The periodic table was mentioned. Could we put in a certain element, maybe make it a bit more esoteric, add in something like electron or atom control and transmutation, and see what the hell it pops out?
Ooh, I love what you're saying. So here we go. We've got a torus. We've got a magnetic field torus. We have our field lines. They're more diagrammatically represented and not necessarily symmetrical, but we have our field fluctuations. This would be the document that I was looking for. We have what happens in our 2 parallel line conductors with currents flowing in opposite directions, and we have our permeations between those 2 conductors. I am now going down, and pretty soon
see, these would be great.
There it is. See,
we could take that
Figure
picture.
8B, lines of force, equipotential surfaces, and equigradient surfaces between parallel wires. So we have 3 different fields taking a look at this basic diagram. We have our lines. Our lines are our electric scalar potentials. That is the direction of the electric field fluxes from the charge on each individual conductor at that visual point of reference. Now, we have also our magnetic B fluxes, which are our concentric circles surrounding each individual conductor. But there's a third thing. We see the dotted line. That dotted line is our equipotential field, which is how much the variable refractive index of the physical vacuum, the space-time in which we all exist and must survive, is now being represented by the variation in the refractive index because of the saturation between the electric and the scalar the electric scalar and the magnetic curl potentials of these 2 individuated fields. So lines of force, equipotential surfaces, and equigradient surfaces between parallel wires. This is what I was talking about equal potential. We have a saturation of the variable refractive index, which is the space in which we all live. And this is how all flying craft would operate. This is how we would modify that vacuum in order to create a acceleration, deceleration, non-uniform gravitational flux or force. That's what I was looking for, and I do believe that somewhere deep down inside the algorithmic complex, we would have something referring to this.
And that's pretty close to what we saw, isn't it?
Close, but not engineerable.
It was
but
one
I do
pole,
believe it can do it.
It was going in to out. It was interesting.
If it could give us the angles, we would have something to go off.
So here's the video version of that spiral that we generated a little while ago.
I'm liking that.
Jeez, I can't believe it just literally made that.
Yeah, man. And as you were talking about reading through that book, I grabbed a screenshot of that pattern that you showed us. And I'm just going to run through the prompt that you guys came up with, which was magnetic torus with electromagnetic field lines, electron transmutation of the periodic table. And we're going to see what comes out of this image that we just got from that. So
Yeah, the thing is, when we create an asymmetry within the refractive index, when we oversaturate either permeativity or permeability, we end up with a vector force. This vector force is controlled by the gradient, and it equals a linear arrow that we could tell you which direction this entire device would be pointing and which direction of force it would develop. So if we're a flying craft or a flying saucer, an electrodynamic device, we would have inevitable output force, which would give a propulsion. And if this thing can understand that, and we may need to train it, which is perfectly fine, but if we train it on these things, we just might get the solution we're looking for.
or even if it's not the solution, it can be something that
Part of it.
inspires you to find, you know, like steers you towards it a little bit.
Exactly. Anything to help bring us closer, these would be very, very nice, because I do have a huge data set which I would love to feed exclusively into the AI and just have it analyze all of the data points and find the commonalities. We're looking for patterns here. Effectively, this is a puzzle-solving problem. Just like a crow trying to figure out how to get the food out by using a small tool, the AI is attempting to find similarities within the imagery, which is so portrayed graphically by brilliant scientists who come before us.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is all based on that image from the book, and it's following it a little bit. Oh, wow, this is cool. It almost looks like a 3D program.
Man, I can't believe you just pulled that off. That's so awesome. I'm so impressed. Sorry, don't mind me being giddy, but this is actually pretty exciting.
Right?
And the way that you're describing the pattern recognition, I mean, that's exactly how all these, you know, either it's the language model for ChatGPT or these stable diffusion models, it's all about pattern recognition. And for example, one of the latest open source text ones, I think it's called Llama, which is just another play on the word for large language model, but it's called Llama 1.2. And the 1.2 represents that, like, if me and you were trying to describe pattern recognition through, you know, conventional means as human beings, like, we're probably going to cap out once we come up with like 100, let's say 1,000, hell, let's say 100,000 different categories of variation, right? Eye color, skin color, like lighting conditions. It, like, once you max out around like 100,000 of just talking as people, well, the 1.2 represents 1.2 billion parameters. So these AI models, they know how to classify anything they see or read into no less than 1.2 billion different categories, which is so far beyond the realm of even, I think, human understanding, right? Like it's a number. I know that a billion is a number and how many zeros are in it, but to actually fathom a billion of something in quantity is amazing.
The quantity of connectivity is just really beyond what is functionally applicable in the day-to-day moment of a human being. It's way beyond.
I know that GPT-5, even GPT-4 has the capabilities of doing precisely what I need it to do.
Jeremiah, you're talking about solving a puzzle, and if you have a couple pieces of the puzzle and you know the part that's missing, and you have a good keyword for that missing part, do you think that this could generate a possible theoretical reference for you then?
I genuinely believe that it could generate a graphical representation of a solution, which would require the human being to then take that graphical representation and calculate out a mathematical equivalence or an engineerable output. So we would have to still take that and interpret it, just like the AI is interpreting our linguistic or language-based interpretation.
For the sake of demonstration, do you have a puzzle? You know the solution to it, but let's say you just give 2 pieces in the prompt, and then, you know, a keyword in the middle, test to see if the AI can solve it.
So far, from what I've seen, it's not quite capable of doing something in that level of abstraction.
Okay.
I don't doubt that it will get there. Right now,
Okay.
what I'm seeing, from what I've seen
Well,
just
in
today
the
alone,
future
tells me it
generation.
will do it. It has the ability. It's fully capable. It just requires us as humans and as the input mechanism of choosing the terms to tell it what we want.
Well, yeah, I wanted something that was actually well-known information that the AI would have access to. We might already know the answer. I just wanted to run it through a test where we give it 2 pieces of the puzzle, suggest a keyword that, you know, is that missing piece, and see how the AI answers in its generations of the, you know, the artwork it's creating.
I won't lie, I'm terrified that it will be able to easily find the solutions and that it's going to basically irrelevant.
I'm just saying it's a good test for something that will go into something more theoretical. That's all.
We could try this. I think a
Yeah.
lot of these image-based models, the puzzle they're trying to solve is, how do I take this text and create an image that matches that text? And it does it through a series of this prompt generation and something called clip, where clip is basically taking each iteration. When you see it starts out blurry and then it iteratively gets more and more focused. In each of those phases, it's passing that image back through this clip inspector, and the clip inspector is basically telling it in very objective ways, here's what I see. You know, I see a basketball and I see, you know, like a pink cat or whatever. And then when it feeds it back into that prompt, it's like, well, the prompt doesn't say anything about a basketball or a pink cat. So it just kind of like keeps going back to the drawing board until the
Not
clip
unless you
inspector
define
matches
the
it again.
parameter more. Yeah, you've already done it as an example at least a couple times. You take an iteration, you define the parameter more, you select a piece of the image, and then it goes from there. It doesn't just have to apply the same prompt over it again.
I'm loving all of this stuff.
I can see the power of this software.
First trial, like generation of this, like episode 1, that's some epic stuff. Now, how do we combine the two together? The Burncron pyramid there with that universal field, and bam, there's the ultimate alchemical NFT potential.
Well, if you're willing to play with words and play with AI, I know that language isn't perfect. It might be the way to unlock some answers. I think we've all admitted the possibility of that. We're seeing the potential.
Once again, I'll ask this following question. If we could ask the AI using only already recognized technical terminology or existing terminology, how this might work with currently recognized components or electronic parts. I would love to see if it was capable at this point in its development.
I also want to know if you
together.
can define its source information. You know, where is it deriving the information from? Can you add parameters to where it's drawing the information from instead of all of the internet? Maybe you're specifying a certain library, one that's more academic
so I'll
or
show them
scientific.
So on the top left here, you can see here's all my models that I'm pulling from. I've got way more than just these ones, but for example, this is Open Journey. This is a version that's very similar to Midjourney, and they sample and curate the input similar to how Midjourney does. There's another one. The one I've been using is called Realistic Vision, where they basically sample very high quality, like professional photographs. This one called I love the name, Illuminati Diffusion. This one is one of the most advanced ones that's open to the public right now, and they use an extra little feature called offset, where during each of these steps of denoising, instead of just treating almost, I'm gonna just throw some simplistic phrases out here, but instead of treating every formula as like a deterministic kind of linear formula, they inject like these little offsets through each step of
so
the like
it's
diffusion.
is it creating more abstraction?
I have a question. I have a question for a affiliate in New Jersey, which is, could you please prompt it to generate and here we go, keywords, diagram for Let me think. Geez, what is that word?
I was hesitant about doing Jesus in here because sometimes it just
No.
draws like naked
I'm
people.
thinking it's a gravitational
The
phenomena.
philosopher's
It's
stone.
a kinematic gravitational phenomena. I'm trying to think of the exact words. The specificity is really, really important, and it has to do with the Falcon Labs research. I'm trying to find the exact term to feed the algorithm for their research, and just give me a moment.
Yeah, I'm running,
Gravitomagnetic. Okay, here we go. Complete gravitomagnetic diagram
you have to spell some
of
of this for me.
electromechanical anti-gravity.
You
Jeremiah,
just need
can
to
you write
spell
it
some.
down?
Yeah.
Spell it in the private chat so we can
Yeah.
cut and paste it in.
I'll say it again. Complete
No,
gravitomagnetic
he
diagram of
needs the spelling. He needs the spelling.
anti-gravitational device. Something like that.
Yeah, but he needs the spelling.
Yeah, graphito-magnetic. It's a new word for me.
Graphito,
Just
as
say
in
it-
gravity.
Just say it much
Gravitomagnetic.
slower. Say it slower, like with foreign people, where if you say it really slow, he might figure out how to spell
Yeah,
it.
do the phonetics real nice and slow.
Complete gravitomagnetic diagram of operational device.
Okay, I thought there was an electromechanical in there. So we've got.
I thought I heard that too, honestly, like
I'm
electromagnetic.
changing that. I'm modifying it and trying to refine the minimum number of stray.
So here's BurnEye's Philosopher's Stone, and I'm gonna swap out Philosopher's Stone with the prompt that you just gave me.
But if
Wait,
somebody, hey,
what-
we have a big audience, right? We've got a lot of viewers. I would highly recommend that we take a chance to involve the audience here for their better use of terms.
Yeah,
safe for work
absolutely.
only, guys. This will make anything you tell it.
We've got Falcon in there. We've got a lot of
It's
other people
kind of
in
like
there.
a
Let's
tarot
give a
reading, but
turn.
with
Let's get
AI.
it.
Just send
Okay,
us
let's
your
see.
words.
Complete
Dude,
gravitomagnetic diagram
this
of
one actually looks
operational
amazing.
device coming from
Did
Falcon
it give
Space.
the
11:21 p.m.
chakras there or something in one of those?
This
too?
is the
Like,
prompt that he
that's
just gave me. Complete gravitomagnetic diagram for operational device. And the only thing I added was Cinema 4D, Global Illumination 12K. And these are just
Which is a
to make it look
stylistic
3D. Correct.
instruction. Yeah.
So, man, these actually look really cool. I love these.
Yeah, can we go
Look
through
at
one?
the field
Yeah,
dynamics. I
Could
would not
you
dismiss this.
could you use a style that's perhaps more realistic, like true to life?
Maybe add the word technical
after
in
you
front of
write it,
diagram.
Liminal, after you write it.
Well, he's gonna know best which styles are gonna be more true to life or more abstract. He's obviously
Yeah, we're also
busy.
using Illuminati diffusion model right now, which
I know.
is a
Yeah,
little
I was
bit
gonna
more
say
We're
artsy.
going through
this is-
Illuminati confirmed, supposedly.
Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it, Mark. Let's get the subtext and the exact verbiage.
Yeah, which one do you think is the best selection for technical output?
I almost always just end up with this realistic vision, even though it's trained on photographs. It just happens to look
possibly
really
try
good.
that one then, because of what he's asking.
So here's it is on the Illuminati diffusion, which is going to have more of like a hand-drawn artistic look to it. But I added a realistic diagram on graph paper, so that's kind of what we got here.
I swear to God, I want every single one of these diagrams.
Yeah, I
I
can send
really
you
would
all
love
these,
to
man.
analyze each of these.
So right now, all I did was change. I'm even going to use the same seed. So here, for example, let's take this one. I'm going to take that exact seed, and the seed is basically like its fingerprint. And I'm going to regenerate this exact image again, along with 7 others, now using just the realistic vision model. Nothing else is changing. And you're going to be able to see how different the model itself changes everything. And these there's endless amounts of models. And if you wanted to say, train one to look a certain way, you can just feed it. I think the minimum is about 15 images. So if you went and found 15 images in a certain aesthetic that you liked, and you have to know how to describe what those images are to the model again. So like, for example, if we were to feed back one of these into it, you'd have to say, circular diagram in red ink on graph paper.
That's kind of what I was trying to ask,
like that.
about 10 minutes ago. If you can select the source material, and that's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, so all of these are based on Stable Diffusion at some like core level, and Stable Diffusion is someone that trained, you know, millions or billions of images into this huge model, and then every other model that came after that, for the most part, is someone that just went and trained like an extra 15 to 300 to maybe 1,000 images. So now that model knows about something that he didn't before. So like maybe perhaps the original Stable Diffusion model might not know who Bill Gates is, right? But if you feed 100 images of Bill Gates and tell it every time it reads one, this was Bill Gates.
It's going to give you a
Here he is
pretty
sitting.
accurate representation. Yeah.
Exactly. So here's the realistic vision. You can already see it looks more realistic.
Please don't feed it 200 images.
So you
it's
can
too late,
feed
man.
you can feed this a lot of pre-existing technical schematics, and I'm certain get very interesting results.
Yeah,
so
so like if
every
we
image
were
we're
to do
looking at
one
right
like,
now is being generated by that system.
this is all just being generated on like a GPU. Yeah.
That's
This brings me back to being curious about one element on the periodic table transmuting into another one. And I don't know if it requires being fed source material about like the electron valence, the way the atom looks, and then using the certain words like maybe atom control or electron valence or electron
nuclear
control.
magnetic moment or dynamic nuclear orientation.
And then transmutation. Yeah. Maybe that requires some source material.
Yeah, I mean, usually it doesn't know exactly what you need, but training it.
I would imagine the more esoteric or the more out there it gets, the harder it's stretching to bring the feedback to you.
So if you know of an actual image or diagram that's similar to what you're looking for, you can see exactly how much it knows about it. So like I'm gonna grab this circuit design, for example, if I can find one. Yeah, so let's see. If I save this out, and we can try and see what it knows about that image, and this will usually tell you how much it needs to be trained. Oh, actually, I don't have an interrogator on this one.
You don't have an interrogator on your...
So I got this one right here. I've got, this is actually, it's called an interrogator.
Yeah, it's called an interrogator.
And then if I were to feed it, for example, that schematic.
Okay.
And I was mentioning before clip models. Clip is how the model looks at an image and then turns it back into text, as opposed to taking text and turning it into an image. So here's all these different clip models that you go through.
Wow.
This is one of the more popular ones, is the VIT L14. So
if I hit lose your life in this program.
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many options and models and ways to train. And this is probably going to take a little while. Let's see. Yeah, it's going to load up the clip interrogator, and then this actually takes more time. It's kind of crazy that the amount of time it takes for a computer to make an image that can fool your eyes is almost nothing. You've seen, I hit, generate, and it's like, here's 10 images that are all fool you. But to do the inverse and to say, here's an image, tell me what's in it,
on the computer, though, isn't it drawing power from from the cloud when it generates the image? It's not all processing on your compuder.
No, this is all 100% happening on the computer.
You must have a nice computer.
Is happening in the cloud. This is actually this is running on a 1080, which has, I think, 11 gigs of RAM. If you've got a video card that has 8 gigs, you can do pretty much anything that you've seen.
It just might take longer.
At home.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this one's going to take a
the amount
while.
of time I'd have to spend in the lab to do this kind of research versus how I can get this
clearly can be its own research tool if you're willing to put in the time to bring the research to this program to train it. It looks like it could be a really invaluable research, tool.
I'd love to train it, but unfortunately, I don't necessarily
we are already.
all the relevant information in the public genre. I would really love to train it in a more private or.
Because that you have very specific information, and if you just plug that in, sky's the limit almost, it sounds like.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
was
I'm
gonna
seeing
mention if
At
any
the
of you guys
same
are
time,
interested at all, I would
I
recommend
don't.
looking into this thing called LoRa, because LoRa is the quickest way to take a stable diffusion model and train your own images on it. And there's all sorts of guides that'll walk you through it step by step. You can run them for free. It takes a little bit of reading, but everything you can do in the cloud for free. You upload a folder of 15 images up to like Google Colab, and then you just follow these steps where you just describe what's in the image. You let it do its thing for like 15-20 minutes, and then you download this LoRa file, which is around anywhere from 10 megs to like 200 megs. And then next time that you go and generate something through Stable Diffusion, you can pass in what you would call like the LoRa network. So every time it does this iterative updating, it'll then say, oh, you also want me to make sure that it looks like, you know, a guy throwing up a rainbow or whatever. And
So
it
you're
kind of
saying
like stacks that on top.
it will continue to seek out information that looks like what you trained it for?
Correct. You're basically like slipping in an extra layer of training without having to train an entire model. You take a LoRa and it's almost just like giving it like a little bit of extra context. Like here's a little like a Cliff Notes version of this book or this person. So now when you ask it about it, it's like, oh, I know what you're talking about now. Whereas before it didn't know who Bill Gates was.
Right. So you're curating it for your own needs. And then it becomes unique versus what might be running on someone else's computer.
And then here's what it thinks this image is. So we've got a circuit with two different types of voltages. That's actually pretty good.
need to copy
Right?
that.
Yeah.
But then we've got a bunch of weird stuff. We've got LOLTH. It didn't greasy. I don't know what that means. Inkscape,
To
which
get
is a
greasy, girl.
vector program.
Hold on, can we enlarge that image? Would you mind?
I mean, this is
wanna
just a
take
regular
closer
image I
look
Like,
grabbed
can
offline.
you
Before we
maybe-
jump on,
Can you maybe
I
do
just wanna see
a
if this is valid
magnifying
diagram.
glass over the text? Do you have a magnifying glass function where we can just see the text larger?
Well,
Not
I
the
can just try
text,
to zoom in
the
like
image.
that.
Okay, there
Oh,
we
the
go. Okay,
image. Yep.
let's just pause on this for a second. Let me just take a quick
Why do
look
they
at
both
this
say
diagram.
don't?
Oh, again,
And
this is
before
an
we move
image
on-
I found on Google. This wasn't generated. This was an
Oh,
actual
okay.
schematic on Google Images.
Oh,
This is
never
a
mind.
don't
I was
image.
hoping it generated this. Never
So
mind.
yeah, this I just grabbed off Google, but I'm saying like this was the inverse. Instead of us saying draw me a picture of, it's like, hey, here's a picture, tell me what the picture is. So
So
this is it.
is it telling you kind of like how it's thinking or interpreting the picture, even though it didn't render it? It's just telling you how it's assessing it.
Right. And the way that it works is that if I told it what I wanted, then each step that it iterates,
Golden
it's running
rule.
this in the background.
So with the
Yeah.
prompt, the AI gives you
Golden
its
rule.
assessment. It looks like you can go back into that and take out certain words that don't make sense so that it can refine the way that it is discerning, judging, assessing the image you fed it.
Yeah, and this is very imperfect. This is like the best guess it can come up with. So if I take
Mhm.
that prompt that it thinks what it is, and I feed it back into an actual prompt and tell it to generate it, we're probably not going to get anything that even
see.
looks remotely close to
A
what it
circuit
just.
with two different
know.
types of voltage.
Let's see what
Well,
it says. This is
it-
going to look like.
Didn't greasy landscape figure 1. Let's instead ask it for, instead of diagram, let's ask it for a schematic of a gravitomagnetic circuit.
You're gonna have to spell this one for me too, my friend.
Schematic of a gravitomagnetic circuit.
Oh, this is the same word as before.
We're just removing a lot of words. We're simplifying it down.
Here you go. Schematic of a gravitomagnetic circuit.
There we go. Let's see what it comes up with. I would love to see this. I wonder how adept it really is.
Well, so it's probably gonna try to break this down into, if it doesn't know what gravitomagnetic is, it will know what gravity is, and it'll know
It
what
might
magnetic
know.
is. So here's what we got out of the other end of it. You'll have to tell me if it got close. I'd be
Let's
surprised
take
if
a look
it
at
did.
some of the outputs.
Yeah, it's almost done cooking here. Oh, I had this cranked all the way up on steps. Let's drop it down a little bit.
This is
Complexion,
awesome, by the way,
better.
man. And I appreciate your patience with like my lack of understanding
Look
of
at how
how
much
this
it looks like
algorithm works.
alchemy
So
symbols.
thank
though.
you.
Yeah, I love this, man. This is so fun to me. So yeah.
I really appreciate
This
it.
is
This
actually
is fun to me
looking
too,
like
man.
alchemical paintings of the past. Like this is amazing.
Whoa! What do we look at there? Jeez, are you guys seeing the Ankh?
Yeah,
yeah.
brother.
Actually, speaking of, like, I want to do an inpainting on that. So I can send this guy to inpaint, and I can see what you're talking about. Here's kind of the Ankh a little bit here, right? It's almost as if.
Yeah, but look at those arrows coming out of the side. I mean, there we go.
Yeah, where the energy splits, right? Like very, very like.
So I wonder if I type Ankh in here, what we
fascinating.
get on the other end of that.
I hate to say that a computer is doing this, but this is quite remarkable.
I have to give it a little bit more leeway to do what it needs to do.
You should really be focusing on those arrows coming out the sides.
I'm on my phone. I can't. Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
Holy shit.
Oh.
We just summoned a demon, I think, on live air.
Oh, shit.
Let's get. I want to see 8 of
It's
those.
dope as hell.
What was the base? What was the base model that you were using? Like you
This
have
one's
a
called
like 12.
Realistic
right?
Vision
Okay,
version
realistic.
1.3. Well, let me just make sure there's nothing inappropriate before I make it bigger. Okay.
It's like, let's not spread any demons.
Too late.
Dear.
They're all here. We've introduced them all to the universe.
What happened? What? I'm sorry. I had to go to the bathroom. What was the prompt? What was the prompt?
I should mention this much.
We just grabbed this.
In the esoteric alchemical practices, we can recognize quite coherently that all of the imagery and the geometric relationships happen to do directly with the scalar and acoustic relationships of real physical forms coming out of this physical construct, which we call reality. And so the Ankh is a geometric form acoustically represented as a symbolic figure.
It's symbolic. It's obviously not an accurate representation of the waveforms.
It's accurate enough to be functional.
Well, it makes me really curious to ask about prompts that I don't know are okay to ask about right now.
Like what?
That's
There's
looking
no,
better.
like,
I like
this
that.
point,
Here
it
we
doesn't
go.
matter.
Now we're getting
Well,
back to the
you know,
earlier side of it.
time, scalar, along those lines, you know.
Yes, our
so I've got
temporal
scalar
dynamics are
acoustics
quite
and stuff.
relevant here.
I would be curious to see what it says. I just didn't know if it was kosher to talk about all those things just yet.
Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah, whatever we want.
Well, time waves.
Temporal field disruption, temporal wave,
Or
time
interaction between two generators. A little wordy, but
temporal interaction between two separate.
Here we go. Temporal interaction between two generators, time waves, temporal field disruption.
Oh, this should be good.
And this doesn't have any sort of aesthetic properties to it. So if we wanted to, we could start adding, like, you know, visual components to this instead of just kind of abstract. So here we're just going to get a bunch of energy, it looks like.
Wow.
I think
Can you zoom in on some of those?
I guess that wasn't that bad.
It even
Look
says
at the
time travel. Almost says
circular
time travel.
Wow,
Right?
this
Like,
whoa.
this is so fascinating.
This is
See,
awesome.
this one right here, I love this look. So this would be one that I would like to bring into
Save that, please.
here.
Yeah,
I'll
save
plug
them
that
all,
seed
please.
in.
Yes.
Definitely.
Save
Yes,
that. I want that image.
I would
Can you
love
make
to
a video of any of
all
these?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a video of that one exactly right
Yeah.
here. This temporal interaction, And we're just going to run it for another 120 frames just to make it go a little bit quick. It'll probably take like 3 minutes while we talk.
Sure.
Nice. Loving this.
Yeah, and everything that I'm generating here, it's saving somewhere. And even cooler than that, the way that this particular version of Stable Diffusion through Automatic 1111 works is as it generates each of these images,
Away from my
it
keyboard.
saves all these prompts, the model it used, the seed, the
So
batch count, everything.
you can look back to your history almost like on a web browser, but for your AI.
Yeah, it's
generator.
stored in the headers of the images. So any of these images, like if I were to open this up in a PNG viewer, it'll show. Actually, I can probably do a PNG chunk inspector. So if I take that image and just drop it into here, I don't know if I can do that without screwing anything up. Let me see.
We are the temporal electrodynamic engineers.
Okay, now I can't do it easily without having.
I'm also
open,
tempted to add the
that.
word gravity to that time string, but
I would agree.
I gotta wait for this thing to finish now before I run anything else through it. We got about a minute. I've got high hopes for this one though, because usually if the image looks really good like this, the animation looks even better.
Right?
Ooh.
So
Dude,
I
this is
couldn't do it on
awesome.
my larger channel. I was like, no.
Never seen a stream like this. This is really dope as heck.
You know, this was actually, I was telling Bernie before we started, this is my first sort of like live stream on my channel ever. And originally I was planning on just doing nothing but this, just loading up Stable Diffusion and just doing a bunch of random images. Although the more I did dry runs, the more I realized you have to have it very well prompted, because you can get sort of like non-YouTube kosher images if you're not being very careful on the prompts that you're putting in.
You also
you
get
didn't
to
exactly tell it to find a sexy equal potential field or something.
I was gonna say you get to flex your skills on the fly when people are asking you for some really weird prompts, and you're doing a great job. You're awesome.
What a sexy
this was absolutely amazing first episode to do, brother. And we'll be doing many more. Especially we should do another one under Benton's stream next week if you've got time, or the next time you got time, Thomas. I'll be in touch to do that. We can keep going as long as you guys want to keep going, though. Right now I'm in no hurry to
I've got maybe another 20 minutes, because then I've got to get up in 5 hours to work.
Exactly, because we're at 2 hours 22 minutes and 11 seconds as I said that.
Epic.
My cat is absolutely fascinated. She is loving this.
Dude, if you want to start plugging cat prompts in, it will make you the coolest looking cats, because if there's one thing that the internet has, it's pictures of cats.
That's the next episode. Just cats into it.
She's watching as you're doing this, and for a while she was looking at the screen, and then she'd look behind the TV, behind the monitor, and like all confused, and look back up front and look at what's going on, and look behind it like, the fuck is this?
We're going to mix a cat in. So now we've got a realistic portrait of a cat, and the background is going to be a temporal interaction between two generators and time waves. And here we go with the cat in this temporal time wave.
One cosmic kitty.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And now we see how the universe began. The cat knocked some shit off.
Oh, and the whiskers, bro. The whiskers are making the pattern.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Dimensional kitty. That was the one.
Ain't gonna deny.
This is my favorite
dope
one
as
for
hell.
sure.
This is super cool.
You guys got any last requests while we wrap up here?
No, actually, I don't want to overtax it. I'm really satisfied with what I've learned.
Just
about
to
the
balance
capability
it,
of
we gotta
algorithm.
have a dog. We gotta have an intergalactic dog
fair.
as well.
We're gonna even add of an intergalactic dog.
That is,
thank you, Hyper Barocco, for the
you know how many people want cat art, just cat art, and you could just sell this. You know,
I know, that's what I'm saying. The next episode, the next stream, just cats, and I will make a bunch of little shorts out of it, and we will reach 5 million views
take
per
requests,
one. Take
requests, shoot them out, make it happen. I don't know.
We got some
Oh,
intergalactic
wow.
dogs here.
My
Please,
kitten.
please, Bernie, transfer me the contact information for who we are
absolutely.
talking with now. I would very
With
much like
Thomas
to.
and
Yeah, you can reach
go-
out to me on Twitter at Paranoid America, on Instagram at Paranoid American, and then just paranoidamerican.com. You can find all my contact information. And in case anyone's meeting me for the first time here, I also want to plug that beyond just doing AI, I've been publishing comic books about esoteric research and conspiracy theories for over 10 years that I started when I was at Disney. So I took all the training and all the motion graphics and sort of, you know, gestalt information that I got from Disney, and I've making comic books about them. And you guys are probably like this one in particular. This one's called Secret Mystery School. And it's about
Cool.
these 3 college students that accidentally become enlightened because this guy here, Phil, this is Phil and this is Colin, which is a play on Phil Collins. But Phil makes this special little blend of
I
psilocybin
never
and
would have
DMT,
caught that.
and it accidentally makes them enlightened, and they go to this realm of like enlightened sort of ascended masters, and then they have
Whoa,
to
ho, ho!
become
What are you
actually
doing?
enlightened.
Like some Doctor Strange kind of stuff, maybe a little bit, but for youngins.
that's amazing.
Is this a print?
Nicely
Yeah,
done.
That's
nice
that's a
book.
color print comic. Yeah.
That's nicely done.
Yeah, these are legit comics, man.
Next level
Yeah.
work, brother. And you got a series with Juan too, right? The Chosen.
I do. I don't have it
One
right
with
next
Juan
to me. I've
Iola.
got a series called the Chosen Juan, which is about Juan's adventures. Here's another one called
Nice.
Paranoid American History 101. This is over 80 pages,
Ooh,
a bunch
I
of
like
different
that
stories.
first page, the symbology. You had a symbol on the first page, that graphic. Nice.
Oh,
Very
dear.
nice.
Yeah, this is done by Alex
Man,
Hovey.
in the words of
Again.
Sonic the Hedgehog,
The Adventures of
that's
Fairy
too
Fairy.
cool.
This is a
Very-
comic
very
about
cool. Very
the Skull
cool.
and Bones digging up the grave of Geronimo with
I do
Prescott
like the
Bush.
attention to the border accents. Very cool. Very cool. Are you publishing with any major publishers, or are you going independent right now?
Just me, all independent. I do a lot of my own printing through local printers here in Orlando. I've got some that I work with in Oregon, and then I do a lot of direct to print through like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff.
Oh, I just have to say, it looks very high quality. Very excellent looking.
And here's one that's not even
Yeah.
out yet. If you guys want to see any more of this, it's at nasacomic.com, and this is Never a Straight Answer, which is about Stanley Kubrick directing the moon
Already
landings.
love it.
And this one, as soon as I get enough people signed up at nasacomic.com, I want to get maybe 100 people just signed up to know when it comes out. It doesn't cost anything to sign up. As soon as I get 100 people on board, I'll launch this on Kickstarter. Okay, here he is designing an astronaut spacesuit, and they're debating on whether or not they're going to use, A or B here. And it's obviously the outfit from Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, with the
And
hat.
Here, and if you really like the nitty gritty of conspiracy theories, this is pointing out the 3M projection screen with the beads, which was what they used for that back projection in 2001: Space Odyssey, and perhaps the actual landings. And see the little box of 3M beads here.
Yeah.
So it's got all sorts of these like really deep conspiracy connections that if you appreciate it, you'll find them all in here.
All right. Well, the audience loved it. I shilled the shite out of your YouTube channel as well for you, posting it one more time.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Live on
awesome.
it, your first live. So now you're going to do it every freaking week. And as with Benjamin Balderson, Alden's Alchemy, we will be doing it again. And Jeremiah Lumino, his lovely second half. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, 2.5 hours. It was a gooder.
I'll bring you the technical data.
Right? Like that. Just please, Thomas, after we're done here, send those images because those are epic, and we would.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll take every image, every video that we generated on this stream, and I'll upload all of them to my Patreon for free. Like we won't have to sign up for it or anything. because you've got like public posts, right? So I'll post all this publicly on
Nice.
that Patreon page. So if anyone that wants to download any of
Awesome.
these, I'll include the prompts. I'll include links to how you can try and run all this stuff on your own. And even if you don't want to run it on your own, there's a website called MageSpace that you can pretty much do everything that I just did on the cloud for either free or it's like $10 a month or something like that. I don't get any kickbacks, so it's up to you entirely if you want to do it or not.
That's very generous of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love this, and I want more people to feel comfortable with AI, and more importantly, I want to get people in the habit of looking at it as a tool, like a hammer, that you just take out of your toolbox.
That's what it seems like to me.
With.
It seems like a tool, and if you're training it, what you're feeding it, I think that really matters. So
That's you sharpening your tools, right? Like if you're a chef, that's you sharpening your knives.
It doesn't have to be this scary thing. I think it matters how we treat our tools, like AI.
You can still get stabbed with a knife, right?
Well, yeah,
but
I'm
if
saying
you know how to handle it.
I can't affirm. You know, it's getting conspiratorial, and you might be into that. But you know, some large corporations have unleashed AI that may or might not be sentient, and that might be scary.
And it will reach it at some point, most likely. So,
and if you were the one that let that out on the earth, would you admit it? Would you be like, "Yeah, oops, I'm the one that unleashed
actually,
Skynet"?
A guy from Google some years ago did try to say, "I think this AI has become sentient," and they just kind of pushed him out. You know,
that's happened a few times.
Yeah, more than once. Yeah.
And on that note, I got interview with Pogduck, Michelle Gibson at noon Mountain Time tomorrow. So I need to put that together. We all need to get to bed. We will see everyone tomorrow. Love you all. We'll be doing this.
Thank you, Bernie.
Easy, everyone.
Love you guys.
Love you.